Chapter 489. They seemed to be working together to maintain an array formation. It was a very complicated multi-layered array formation. Lone Moon looked at it for a long time before he recognized that it was a large-scale seal. However, the array formation was not very strong, and it seemed to be on the verge of breaking. There was also a trace of cold aura that was constantly seeping out of it. They were working together to suppress the array formation, as if to prevent the thing inside from escaping. However, it was obvious that they were not strong enough. The cold aura seeped out of the array formation more and more. The thing inside was hitting the array formation again and again. Every time it hit, the entire Howran sect shook. Lone Moon frowned and turned to the person beside him. "Fatty, go and help them." "Yes, master." Fatty immediately rushed over, as if he could not wait any longer. He was good at array formations. Naturally, he knew where to start. He found a direction and conjured a seal to set up the array. He channeled his spirit energy into the array and worked with the others to complete it. "Why are you?" Chan-ji looked surprised. He glanced at Fatty, then turned to look at Lone Moon and the other two. "Focus on setting up the array," Lone Moon reminded him. "The array formation is not complete yet." Chan-ji finally reacted. He hurriedly turned to look at the array formation. With Fatty's help, the pressure on everyone lessened. The cold aura seeping out of the array formation also gradually disappeared. In less than half an hour, the clashing of the array formation slowly stopped. The sea also became calm again. The light of the array formation slowly dimmed. "Thank you for your help, fellow Daoist." Chan-ji nodded at Fatty, then looked at Lone Moon and the others. "It was nothing. Don't stand on ceremony, Court Lord." Fatty smiled and replied. "May I ask, Court Lord, what is sealed in this array formation?" Lone Moon looked at the location of the seal and asked, "Everyone here is a soul formation cultivator. Why does it require all of you to work together to barely seal it?" "This." Chan-ji's expression changed. He seemed to be hesitating. "It's a ferocious beast." An old man behind him answered. "It was the Earth Immortal." "Patriarch, there's no harm in telling them." The old man waved his hand and stopped Chan-ji from objecting. "These few don't look like evil people. Perhaps they might be able to help us if we tell them." "Fellow Daoist, you are." Lone Moon glanced at the elder. An Earth Immortal could actually stay in the lower realm for such a long time without ascending. Furthermore, he was not an itinerant immortal who had disintegrated. This was indeed rare. "This is the ancestor of my sect, Exalted Immortal Jingde," Chan-ji introduced. "So it's fellow Daoist Jingde." Lone Moon cupped his fists politely and replied subconsciously. However, the expressions of the other cultivators present changed. Jingde's status in the sacred arrival realm was different from that of the other cultivators. It was not wrong to say that he was the #1 cultivator in the cultivation world. Perhaps because he was a perfected immortal, everyone addressed him as Exalted Immortal. Lone Moon blurted out, "Fellow Daoist." Even Jingde could not help but frown, but he did not deliberately correct him. Trapped beneath this seal is the ferocious beast Draconic Weep. "What?" sob. Lone Moon was really shocked, and his eyes widened. "What?" Shining turned to look at Chef out of habit. I Ching lowered his head and explained, "Master, the Weeping Sorcerer is an ancient ferocious beast. It appeared in this plane at the same time as the dragons and phoenixes. Its power is not inferior to the divine race. But ferocious beasts are different from the divine race. Ferocious beasts do not have sentience, and they are born to kill. In the ancient times, the divine race fought with the ferocious beasts and killed all the ferocious beasts. Logically speaking, there should be no more ancient ferocious beasts in this world. Then what is this weeping beast? It's a weeping sorcerer. I Ching thought for a moment before continuing. Legend has it that the ancient ferocious beast weeping sorcerer uses yin qi as its soul, blood qi as its spirit, and turbid grievous qi as its bones. It has a violent temperament and only knows how to kill. What's more, it likes to eat flesh and blood. As long as it is alive, it will eat it. I see. Shen Ying's eyes narrowed. Lonman's expression darkened. Why would an ancient ferocious beast appear in the mortal world? Even if it appeared, it should have appeared in the divine world, right? After all, it was at the same time. I'm not very sure about that either. Chanji sighed and said, years ago, when the ancestral master of my sect discovered this weeping sorcerer, he sealed it here and established the Buddha Heart sect, which is now the Hao Ran court. He wanted to use the Buddha light in the sect to purify this ferocious beast's yin qi. He seemed to have thought of something and shook his head. Unfortunately, after so many years, this ferocious beast has not been dealt with. In fact, it has become even more ferocious. Now, even the seal that the ancestral master left behind can no longer suppress it. Just sealing it here is not the solution. Once the ancient ferocious beast appeared, no mortal cultivator would be able to stop it no matter how many of them there were. No, it should be said that even in the immortal world, it would not be easy to subdue it. Sigh, how would we not know that the seal is only temporarily keeping it here so that it cannot go out and harm people? Chanji looked helpless. He raised his head to look at Lone Moon, and something flashed across his eyes. Then, it quickly disappeared. But apart from this, there is no other way. Lone Moon frowned. Chapter 490. This seal requires 24 cultivators who are at least at the soul formation stage to set up different arrays at the same time. Our sect originally had 24 soul formation cultivators, but... Chanji pointed at the cultivators around him and continued, a few months ago, one of our cultivators died, causing a gap in the array. Although Patriarch Jingde can patch it up, there will be a gap when the new seal replaces the old one. If no one is guarding the place now, we will not be able to defend the array. If no one is guarding it, the beast will take the opportunity to escape. That's why we don't dare to reseal it. So... Loneman's expression darkened. You want us to guard you when you reseal it? I know that's a little too much, Chanji sighed. Chanji sighed and said, the ancient beast is really too dangerous. Although it's only for a moment, it's hard to avoid other problems. That's why it's always been our sect's elder who personally guards the array. Sigh, everyone, please leave quickly. If it's just guarding the array, we're willing to try. Fatty quickly stepped forward and said, Court Master, we can't delay the sealing of the beast. Leave it to us. This. Chanji was still hesitant. Guarding the array is very important. Fellow Daoist Huize alone, I'm afraid, Fatty could only look at Lone Moon for help. Master, Chanji also turned to look at Lone Moon inquiringly. Lone Moon's eyes narrowed. After a while, he sighed and replied, including me and Chef, the three of us should be enough. Since Fatty had already agreed, Lone Moon could not reject. Then let's do it. Only then did Chanji look relieved. He cupped his fists and bowed solemnly to the few of them. This is for the sake of the world. Chanji thanks everyone. The cultivators behind him also looked delighted. Their eyes lit up as they looked at the few of them. There's no time to lose. Let's start now. With that said, the few of them lined up and returned to their original positions. Chanji pointed to the middle of the group and said, everyone, please guard the eye of the array. Be careful not to let the yin qi inside leak out. Fatty nodded and walked towards the center of the array. Lone Moon and I Ching exchanged a look before pulling Shining over to stand with them. At Chanji's command, the Earth Immortal and the Soul Formation cultivators activated the array. Instantly, many different types of arrays appeared above their heads, layer by layer. In less than a moment, the huge array reappeared beneath their feet. The sea below them began to surge unstably, as if something was about to jump out of the array. Fatty's expression became even more nervous as he hurriedly summoned his spirit sword and cast a spell. He kept a close eye on his feet so that he could discover the yin chi of the ferocious beast at the first instance and stop it in time. He was highly focused and his heart was in suspense, afraid that he would miss something. However, when he unintentionally turned to look, he discovered that the three people beside him were standing leisurely, as if this matter had nothing to do with them. They did not even lower their heads to look at the formation. Not to mention the person who was focused on munching on the fruit. Ha! Fatty stared blankly for a moment, a dumbfounded look on his face. Master! Weren't they supposed to guard the array together? Why did it seem like he was the only one who was nervous? What's the rush? Lone Moon gave him a look as if he was looking at an idiot. Although the actors are in place, the show hasn't started yet. Ha! What did he mean? Before Fatty could react, the new seal above them had already been completed, forming an array that was exactly the same as the one beneath their feet. It was slowly descending, about to replace the seal below them. Suddenly, he heard a crisp cracking sound, as if something had been opened. He saw that in the middle of the two overlapping arrays, a huge black hole had opened up. It was right in the middle of the array, right beneath their feet. In an instant, the entire sky was filled with yin chi, filling up the entire array. The seal had been opened. Not good. Fatty's heart jumped. He turned and shouted in Chanji's direction, "Court Lord, the ferocious beast is about to..." Before he could finish speaking, he saw Chanji suddenly smile at him. It was no different from before, but for some reason, it was filled with malice. Fatty felt a chill run down his spine, and a chill ran down his spine. Only then did he realize what was going on. In the next moment, the ground beneath their feet sank and their vision turned black. The few of them instantly fell into another world, and the array above them disappeared. Their surroundings fell silent. Only the familiar sound of someone chewing on a fruit could be heard. Lone Moon conjured a fire elemental spell to light up the surroundings. But it was only limited to the few of them. Everywhere else was still pitch black. Master! Fatty was still in a daze. He turned to look at Lone Moon, as if he was a wounded cub. What? Lone Moon rolled his eyes. Is this the first time you've been lied to? Don't worry, you'll get used to it after a few more times. What kind of logic was that? Fatty frowned, but for some reason, he did not feel that upset anymore. After a while, he said, "Master, you're saying that court." Chanji was lying when he said that he was going to reseal the ferocious beast. He purposely locked us in here. The seal was indeed a lie, but the ferocious beast might not be the same. Ah! Fatty was stunned. Roar! In the next moment, a loud roar resounded in his ears. A few meters away, two balls of red light suddenly appeared and floated towards them. Upon closer inspection, they realized that they were actually a pair of eyes. Beneath the eyes was a huge monster that they could not see clearly. Its entire body was black, and it was shrouded in layers of black yin chi. It opened its huge mouth and was about to bite the few of them. Fatty felt his heart sink. In the next moment, his entire body seemed to be frozen. He could not move at all. The overwhelming pressure seemed to be crushing him. He instinctively wanted to kneel down, but Lone Moon pulled him back and lifted him up. Seeing that the huge beast was about to bite him, I-Ching was just about to act when Shining suddenly frowned. She said coldly, it stinks." With that said, she suddenly raised her hand and slapped the beast. "I told you not to breathe at people. Don't you have any F*king idea that you have bad breath?" With a loud bang, the ferocious giant beast instantly smashed into the ground with a loud thud. A few crisp cracking sounds could be faintly heard, as if something was breaking. With the thick, indistinguishable chi on the ferocious beast's body instantly disappeared. Its head was directly stuck in the crack in the ground, unable to be pulled out no matter how hard it tried. It could only widen its pair of bloodshot eyes and look in the direction of the few people in horror. Its huge body trembled, and after a long time, it finally let out a weak cry, "Meow, Fatty, I-Ching, Lone Moon, what happened to the ancient ferocious beast?" Chef silently kept his sword. If he had known, he would have done it earlier. He would not have troubled Master. Chapter 491. It was as if Fatty was meeting Shin-Ing for the first time. He scanned her from head to toe in disbelief. Was Miss Shin so powerful? As if sensing his gaze, Shin-Ing suddenly turned around and handed something over to him. With a serious expression, she asked, "Do you want some fruit?" Fatty paused. He looked at the fruit in her hand that was obviously bitten off. Why was she asking him to eat fruit again? Wait, could it be that she despised the fact that the beast had just spat on the fruit? Was that why she wanted to give it to him? No. Miss Shen was definitely not that kind of person. She must have seen that he was frightened, so she gave it to him to calm him down. She only gave him half of it because there was only one left. That must be it. No need. Thank you, Miss Shin. Fatty shook his head. Oh. Shin-Ing retracted her hand with a look of disappointment. Then, she threw it away, took out a new one and continued to chew on it. Fatty, he felt as if he had been stabbed somewhere. It hurt. Where are we? Shin-Ing asked. We should be underwater, Lone Moon replied casually. Then, he took out a pearl and their surroundings lit up. It was not just the few of them. Everything around them lit up. It was only then that the Fatty discovered that they were indeed at the bottom of the water. They were surrounded by a bubble-like spirit formation. Lone Moon must have set up this array the moment they fell into the water. The bottom of the water was desolate. Apart from a trembling beast, there was nothing else. This place was not big. It was only a few 100 feet away. They could see the end of it at a glance. It looked like a body of water that had been specially created. Lone Moon controlled the barrier and brought the few of them to the bottom of the water. They looked around but did not find anything special. Master. Fatty looked at Lone Moon, who seemed to be looking for something. He could not help but ask, when did you find out that Chan-Ji was lying to us? Looking at how calm they were just now, it was obvious that they knew Chan-Ji's motive and came here on purpose. Lone Moon glanced at him and replied, from the moment they told me that the beast in the seal was the sorrowful beast. Wasn't that right from the beginning? Chan-Ji acted like he did not want to implicate us, yet he did not hide the fact that the beast was sealed. Lone Moon snorted. He said he would send us away, yet he made it so clear about the seal. Isn't he obviously trying to drag us down with him? Even the disciple who said he would bring them down the mountain was brought here after Lone Moon had said a few words. It was obvious that it had been arranged from the very beginning. Did they think that he couldn't see through this trick of loosening the reins only to grasp them better? He kept saying that the seal was unstable a few months ago, but we only arrived at Haoran Court a month ago. If he really didn't want to implicate us, why did he suggest for us to come here? Chan-Ji to the sorrowful, Chan Long as he said, Chan-Ji and Dao. Time as he, Chan Shao and time as well. Time as, tu. Sorrowful beast could destroy a small world. But this did not include the sorrowful beast. Chef had told him that the sorrowful beast was an earth beast. Earth beasts were connected to the earth veins of their habitat. Earth beasts could not leave their habitat. In other words, the sorrowful beast was a shut-in beast. Unless it was in danger, it would not come out. Others might not know about this, but Chef, who had inherited the divine heritage, knew it very well. This way, it was obvious that they were talking about the seal array. They were trying to lure them into the array. But I have no enmity with how ran court. Why would they do this? Fatty still could not understand. Lone Moon scanned him from head to toe. What else could it be? Fatty paused and pointed at himself. Me? Do we have any other Tripiaceus meat here? What was Tripiaceus meat? But they are Buddhist cultivators? Fatty's eyes widened in disbelief. We can't be sure if they are real Buddhist cultivators. Lone Moon frowned. They must have other motives for locking us here. Let's find out what else is here apart from the beast. So the few of them looked around, but still did not find anything special. Chef, did you find anything? I Ching shook his head. We can see everything here at one glance. There's nothing strange. That's strange. Lone Moon frowned. Why did they put in so much effort to lock us in here? Maybe they don't want to do anything. Shining suddenly said. The two of them paused and then reacted. That's right. Those people did not know what they were capable of. At most, they would think that they were soul formation cultivators. Under normal circumstances, if they came in and there was a beast inside, it was most likely that, at that moment, 3 pairs of eyes looked down at the beast below. The beast whose head was still stuck in the crack was shocked and shook even more violently. Meow meow meow. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He raised his hand and conjured a chain. He tied the beast up and pulled hard. Only then did Weeping Beast come out. The ferocious beast, which had finally managed to escape, looked up at them weakly. More accurately, it looked at Shining, and its whole body trembled. Meow, it cried out. It turned and lowered its head. Then, it stuffed its head back in. This time, it was not stuck. Its whole head was in the crack. Only a ball of black chi was left outside. It shook so hard that it looked like it was going to fall apart. Lone Moon, I-Ching, Fatty, how timid was it? It's just a slap, that's all. Lone Moon had no choice but to pull it out again. He even conjured an earth elemental spell to fill up the crack in the ground. Weeping Beast had nowhere to hide. It turned around in a panic. Finally, its eyes rolled back and it fell to the ground, motionless. It pretended to be dead. The 3 of them, they gave it 0 points for pretending to be dead. Did it think they were blind? Lone Moon sighed and did not care about it anymore. If Chanji and the others' goal was Fatty's flesh and blood, then it doesn't make sense for them to send him in. Weeping Beast liked to eat flesh and blood too. What good would it do them if Fatty was eaten? Lone Moon looked at the cowardly beast. Unless, there's something special about Weeping Beast. Lone Moon suddenly thought of something. He turned to I-Ching and said, Chef, throw the beast in your storage bag to Weeping Beast. The master and disciple pair turned to look at him and sent a wave of resentment. Shining, that has to be eaten. I-Ching, that's master's. Alright, I'll pay for your food. Chapter 492. I-Ching glanced at Shining, then hesitantly opened his storage bag. After searching around for a long time, he finally took out a fish that weighed more than 10 kilograms and handed it over. Here. This was the smallest he had. Lone Moon turned and threw it at the beast below. Perhaps it was too afraid. Si-Chi did not move at all. It continued to lie on the ground, pretending to be dead. "Chef, bring Shining further away," Lone Moon said. Only then did Yi Qing conjure a seal to create a bubble circle. He brought his master along and swam further away. After a while, Si-Chi finally moved. A small part of its body, which was made up of black yin qi, carefully moved towards the fish beside it, as if to make sure that no one was stopping it. Only then did he straighten his body and pounce towards the fish with lightning speed. The black aura on its body dispersed and wrapped around the fish. Not long after, he spat out another complete fish bone from his mouth. Lone Moon paused. "It doesn't eat bones. By right, this beast, which was made up of yin qi, should be able to digest anything. What's more, whether it was a demon or a human cultivator, bones contained more spirit energy than flesh and blood." Yet Si-Chi did not eat them. Could it be that Chan-Ji and the other's goal was, just as he was thinking about it, Si-Chi flipped over once again and began to play dead. There seems to be something on its stomach. Fatty suddenly pointed downwards. Lone Moon took a closer look. Indeed, there seemed to be something drawn on Si-Chi's stomach. He did not notice it because of the heavy yin qi earlier. Now, there seemed to be a faint white light. He called Chef back and flew down to take a closer look. This is an array formation. Between the heavy black qi, there was indeed an array formation. It was glowing faintly, as if it had just been activated. The more Si-Chi trembled, the brighter the array formation became. "It looks like a transportation array," Yi Qing said. Just as he finished speaking, there was a flash of white light. Something flew into the array formation. Lone Moon turned back and saw that the fish bone on the ground had disappeared. Chan-Ji and the other's goal was indeed Fatty's corpse. Lone Moon's heart sank. He looked up at the group. "Let's go, into the array." He made a hand seal and activated the teleportation formation on Weeping's body. In an instant, a bright white light enveloped the four of them. In the next moment, their figures flashed and they instantly appeared in another body of water. Compared to the darkness of the Weeping Beast, this place was the complete opposite. Golden light shone everywhere, and it was even a little dazzling. Large patches of golden light lit up below, as if the entire body of water had turned golden. He looked down and saw something emitting a golden light. This light was very strange. It was not aggressive at all. Instead, it was warm. Was this the light of merit? Lone Moon paused and subconsciously descended. What he saw shocked them so much that they sucked in a breath of cold air. Bones. There were corpses all over the ground, covering the entire bottom of the water, so dense that there was not a single gap. At first glance, there were hundreds of corpses. Some of them seemed to be eternally old, with half of their bodies submerged in the mud. Some of the skeletons were completely exposed, but they were not complete. There were even some skeletons with obvious signs of fracture. However, all of these skeletons were emitting a faint golden light. All of the light at the bottom of the water came from them. For a moment, the few of them were stunned and did not speak for a long time. Until Fatty murmured, "These are golden bodies, golden bodies." His face suddenly paled and he began to breathe heavily, as if he had been hit by something. His eyes were listless. "Fatty." Lone Moon paused and then regained his senses. "What's wrong with you? Why are you suddenly? Wait, why are you crying?" "Crying?" Fatty was stunned. He wiped his face and realized that he did not know when his face was covered in tears. His expression was blank, but his face became even paler. "Yes, why am I crying? What's wrong with me? Master." Hey, Fatty, What's wrong with you? Don't scare me. He really looked too abnormal. I don't know. Fatty cried even harder, but his tears could not be stopped. They flowed more and more. He seemed to be unable to bear it and squatted down. I don't know. I'm just. Miss Shen, why am I? He subconsciously looked toward Shenning, only to feel a strange emotion welling up in his heart. It was so heavy that he almost could not breathe. For some reason, he just wanted to cry at Shenning. He also did not know why he looked for her, but he could not help it. Shen. Miss Shen, I. He looked like he wanted to say something, but could not say it. Shenning looked straight at him, her eyes darkening. Suddenly, she reached out and touched the top of his head. I already know. Fatty was stunned. He only felt a trace of warmth coming from the top of his head. Only then did his chaotic thoughts calm down. The strange emotion in the bottom of his heart also dissipated. In the next moment, he slowly closed his eyes and fainted. What's going on? Lone Moon reflexively helped Fatty up. What's wrong with Fatty? Shenning did not speak. Even Yi Qing's expression darkened at the side, with a hint of anger. Chef. He could only look at Yi Qing. Yi Qing clenched his fists by his side, then said, Father Nyo, a few days ago on an island near Haoran Court, I found many similar spirit herbs. What spirit herbs? Lone Moon was stunned. He did not understand why he suddenly said this. Soul-nourishing grass. Soul-nourishing. Lone Moon's eyes widened. You mean, those elixirs with soul-guiding powder in them came from Haoran Court? Yes. Yi Qing nodded. The uncrouped sea is full of yin qi. It is the most suitable place for soul-nourishing grass to grow. And the nearby islands are full of this kind of spirit herb. So only they could bear to add soul-guiding powder to ordinary elixirs. And only they had it. But what has this got to do with Fatty? Yi Qing's expression darkened. Father Nyo, do you remember what happened to the cultivator that Master and I met? That cultivator was not a reincarnated. Lone Moon stopped mid-sentence. He suddenly thought of something. His face paled instantly. He turned to look at Fatty in disbelief. After that cultivator ate that elixir, he was immediately reincarnated, Yi Qing continued. The elixir naturally does not have such an effect. It only left a mark on his primordial spirit. Someone found this mark and directly reincarnated him into this small world. Cultivators in the lower realm naturally do not have this ability, but Haoran Court has an earth immortal. Yi Qing's expression darkened. As someone from the immortal realm, he naturally has a way to interfere with reincarnation. Together with the soul-nourishing grass, it is not hard to guess who the person who reincarnated that cultivator into the same small world was. That elixir with soul-guiding powder only left a mark so that the people of Haoran Court could more easily find his soul. And Fatty. Jingda's eyes widened in disbelief. His immortal artifact was immediately hit by a huge pain in his chest. The backlash from the destruction of his Dharma artifact hit him. His chi and blood flowed in reverse and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He could not even fly his sword and fell to the ground with Chan Ji and the others. What kind of trash dares to call itself an immortal artifact? Lone Moon's mocking mode was on full display. I'll show you what a real immortal artifact is. With that said, he turned his hand and a huge golden bell appeared in his hand. It grew bigger instantly. Yi Qing, who was watching the show from below, stiffened. Frowning, he asked, Master, Father Nyo's is a divine artifact, right? This was obviously the divine refining bell, one of the 10 great divine artifacts. Although this was obviously a replica that Father Nyo had Sun Shu make, it was still a divine artifact. Shining patted his shoulder. Hey, if Father Nyo says it's an immortal artifact, then it is an immortal artifact, right? Master is right, that is an immortal artifact. Fatty, who had just woken up, the divine refining bell had already fallen. I Ching hurriedly brought his master and the 150-kilogram Fatty out of Hao Ran Court. They hid further away. In the next moment, there was a series of rumbling sounds. Under the immense pressure, a large portion of the originally magnificent palace collapsed. The entire mountain of Hao Ran Court began to collapse, falling into the sea below as if it was falling apart. Just as Chan Ji and the others were about to be crushed under the bell, a golden light flashed. The falling divine refining bell suddenly stopped in midair. Ha! Chapter 494. Lone Moon frowned. He saw that the golden light was coming from the people of Hao Ran Court. The cultivators paused, then a look of joy appeared on their faces. It's the light of merit. We have merit on us. Heretic cultivator, don't even think about hurting us. Merit? Lone Moon immediately thought of the pool of corpses. The anger in his heart grew. Stealing merit counts as merit. He turned his hand and used his assistant's ability. Suddenly, the golden light on everyone's bodies turned into thousands of golden spots that flew into Lone Moon's palm and turned into a golden ball. Lone Moon glanced at it. The golden ball flashed twice and disappeared. He then looked up at a certain spot in the sky. Don't give this kind of thing to people randomly. Suddenly, thunder rumbled in the sky. As if responding to him, there was an inexplicable sense of grievance. And the people below who had lost their merit seemed to have torn off some kind of disguise. Suddenly, ugly black lines started to crawl all over their bodies. This was a sign that they were turning into demons. How? How is this possible? Chan Ji's eyes widened. That person looked like a cultivator. How could he take away their merit so easily? His face was full of fear. He thought of something and shouted to Jingde, Patriarch, he's from the upper realm. He must be from the upper realm. Quick, get the immortal supremacy. Jingde paused. Then, his eyes lit up. He seemed to have reacted. He hurriedly took out a purple talisman and forced himself to inject the last bit of spirit energy into it. He shouted, I beg the immortal supremacy to descend and protect the disciples of Hao Ran Court. The other disciples followed suit and shouted, I beg the immortal supremacy to descend and protect the disciples of Hao Ran Court. Lone Moon, who was about to continue activating the divine refining bell, paused. From the looks of it, Fatty's matter had something to do with the immortal realm. With a thought, he kept the bell. All right. He waited to see which bastard from the immortal realm it was. Chef! Shining, who was nibbling on a fruit, suddenly said, open the realm gate. Master. I Ching was confused. But this realm gate is locked by the heavenly Tao. If we force it open, you can open it now. I Ching paused, then seemed to think of something and nodded. Yes, Master. He raised his head and glanced at the sky. With just a thought, the nomological power that was locking the realm gate up above instantly dispersed, and the realm gate opened. Almost at the instant the realm gate returned to normal, a ray of heavenly light shone down from the sky. It was as if a door had opened up in the sky. The celestial chi that filled the sky immediately surged into this small world. In an instant, even the half-collapsed Hao Ran Court spirit plants began to grow wildly, covering the entire ruins. It's the Immortal Venerable. The Immortal Venerable has arrived. A severely injured disciple cried out in surprise. He looked at the light in the sky excitedly, and the fear in his heart was swept away. Even Chanji and Jingde looked excited, as if they were about to make a comeback. At the same time, an ethereal voice came from the sky. Who dares to bully my disciples and grand disciples? Loneman's eyes narrowed. Suddenly, he felt that he had hit them too lightly just now. He should let them know what it meant to feel fear from the bottom of the cultivation world. The light in the sky grew brighter and brighter. A moment later, a figure with immortal chi appeared in the sky, hidden among the clouds. Accompanied by the heavenly voice, the figure floated down slowly. Loneman's mouth twitched. He was getting impatient from waiting. He could not help but scold, "What are you waiting for? If you want to come down, then come down. Why are you playing background music for yourself?" With that said, he activated the sword array in the sky and threw it towards the sky. In an instant, the sword array wrapped around the foot that had just appeared in the sky and pulled it down. Aya! The so-called immortal supremacy in the sky suddenly fell like a kite with a broken string, crashing onto the ground. And you guys? Lone Moon continued to look up at the sky. If you want to come down, then come down together. With that, the sword array in the sky surged into the entrance of the sky. The next moment, the sky seemed to be filled with dumplings. Dong, 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 one after another, a series of people fell from the sky, crashing into the group of old and weak people in Haoran Court. Some of them could not dodge in time and were hit squarely. Chanji, Jingde, everyone, what was going on? What just happened? How dare you? Among the immortals who were pulled down for no reason, the one with the highest cultivation level immediately regained his composure. Immortal chi exploded from his body. Who dares to plot against me? Yo! An acquaintance. I didn't expect. Lone Moon flew down and looked at the immortal who had just spoken. Country Emperor Yutsang, long time no see. The person who had come was the Emperor of East Sui, Yutsang, who had gone to Invincible Sect to report that something was wrong in the lower realm. Lone Moon did not expect that he would interfere in Fatty's matter. He suddenly remembered the sudden rise of East Sui in the Bo Sea. Now it seemed that the chaos in the rules of this small world was caused by them. More than half of the cultivators from East Sui who had ascended from this small world were probably related to Fatty's many past lives. Young Emperor. Lone Moon. Yutsang paused. His face paled as he recognized the person in front of him. Instinctively, he looked around and found I Ching standing nearby. Celestial Emperor I Ching. How is this possible? The realm gate just. Did you just open it? Lone Moon's expression darkened. Chapter 495. Yutsang was stumped by him and his expression darkened. His gaze towards Lone Moon already carried a hint of hatred, as if he had predicted that today's matter would not end peacefully. He changed his flustered look from earlier and glared at him, saying, "Young Lord Lone Moon's action, are you going to stand up for someone else? I just can't stand you vermin disturbing the order of this world." "Humph, what order?" Yutsang laughed coldly. "Why can't I have a more effective way of ascending when I have the opportunity at the sacred arrival realm? It's all cultivation, is it wrong just because we are faster and easier? The method you're talking about is to conspire with the cultivators of the lower realm to sacrifice someone alive and use the primordial spirit imprint to imprison him for eternity. How could such a person be worthy of being an immortal? Why can't we?" Yutsang retorted loudly. Not just him, the people behind him, including the people of Haoran Court, all looked as if it was a matter of course. Sacrificing him alone can help all of us achieve the great Tao. Why not do such a deal? If you want to blame someone, blame him. Why does he always have such a special constitution, born with a special body and spirit bones, and even his bones can emit merit? The more he spoke, the louder and more confident he became. He has such a special constitution because of the heavenly Tao. Then we should use his flesh and blood to ascend. That should be our opportunity. The fact that we can successfully ascend to the upper realm is the best proof. This is the will of the heavens. What right do you have to say that it's our fault? The moment he finished speaking, the others echoed, feeling that they were making more and more sense. That's right. He was born with such a constitution, he should be food for others. A special body and spirit bones. Such a heaven-defying constitution should not appear in a human. That's right. He actually has the body of a special treasure. Of course, he only has the fate of a special treasure. Spirit plants and plants can all be used as immortal ascension materials. Why can't he? The more they spoke, the more outrageous they became. They no longer treated Fatty as a person, but as an object, a spirit plant. Fatty, who had just woken up, paled as he listened. His whole body began to tremble. His body swayed and he almost lost his balance. Shining helped him up. After some thought, she suddenly tilted her head and said, "You're a human. Don't bother with small animals." Fatty was stunned for a moment, not understanding what she meant. Chef then explained, "What Master means is that those are not fit to be called humans, they are just beasts." Fatty was stunned. A trace of warmth flowed from the bottom of his heart, melting away the chill that had just risen in his heart. In fact, when he saw the corpses in the lotus pond, he had already sensed that they were his. Although he didn't have the memories of his past life, from what they said, he knew how he died. These were clearly high and mighty immortals who had skinned him alive so many times. How could they still be so bold and righteous, criticizing him for having such a body? Why didn't they feel the slightest burden in their hearts? They didn't even feel that it was wrong. But what did he do wrong? Was it because he had a special body? He couldn't help but think that if he hadn't met his master and Miss Shin in this life, he would still have become the material for immortal ascension that they spoke of. He wouldn't even be worthy to be called a person, right? He couldn't figure out why there was such a person in the world. Subconsciously, he moved a few steps behind Shining. Fortunately, there were still people who were different. On the other side, Chef glanced at him and frowned, but didn't stop his actions in the end. Young Emperor Lone Moon, we even passed the heavenly tribulation of ascension. That proves that there is nothing wrong with our method. Yutsang seemed to have found his courage. He even glanced at I Ching in the distance. Something that even the heavenly Tao doesn't care about is, who said that the heavenly Tao doesn't care? Lone Moon's expression turned cold. He interrupted him directly. Do you really think that the heavenly Tao will be so blind to let you off after the disgusting and immoral things you have done? What do you mean? Yutsang was stunned. A trace of panic flashed across his eyes. But he felt that Lone Moon was bluffing. After all, Celestial Emperor I Ching didn't speak from the beginning to the end. He probably didn't want to interfere with mortal affairs. As long as he didn't come out, and it was just young Emperor Lone Moon alone, he might not be afraid. Didn't you suspect the heavenly Tao? Lone Moon's smile became even colder. This group of people had completely disgusted him. Then I'll let you see what heavenly punishment is. Damn it. If he didn't beat them up until they couldn't take care of themselves, his surname wasn't Nyo. He couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with them. He raised his hand. Instantly, a familiar pressure went towards them. Before Yutsang and the rest could react, they felt their bodies lighten. It was as if something was pulled out from their bodies. Looking closely, they saw that the golden light that was originally wrapped around them had all turned into spots of light. They floated towards Lone Moon and then disappeared. Yutsang was shocked. Those merit came from the flesh and blood of that special person in the previous life. After they ascended, they tried all kinds of methods but to no avail. They could only hide it. They didn't expect Lone Moon to take it away so easily. Although merit was useful, in the upper realm, so many of them had the golden light of merit. It was indeed too eye-catching. Now that it was gone, it was to his liking. Chapter 496. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. All right, the heavenly Tao had tolerated it for a long time. Looks like I don't have to do anything. So he kept the sword array and scanned the crowd below. All right, I'll see how the heavenly Tao takes care of you vermin. With that said, he turned and flew back in the direction of Shining and the others. He squeezed into Chef's boundary, took out a chair and sat down. Almost at the same time that Lone Moon sat down, the realm gate that had just been opened closed with a snap. The thunder clouds in the sky became even thicker. This is the heavenly tribulation. Everyone looked incredulous. Why would the heavenly tribulation suddenly appear? None of them had ascended. Moreover, this was the mortal realm. They were people of the immortal realm. Why would the heavenly tribulation of immortals appear in the mortal realm? Unfortunately, such a thing did happen. The thunderclouds were tens of times more severe than any heavenly tribulation. Finally, with a loud boom, tens of lightning of different colors descended from the sky at the same time, striking down on the crowd below. Yutzong and the others tried their best to resist, but to no avail. Even the best immortal weapons were shattered by the heavenly tribulation. Just one strike was enough to shatter their meridians and cause their cultivation to regress. Before they could react, the next lightning struck down, as if it couldn't wait any longer. Now they finally understood why Lone Moon wanted to take away their merit. Unfortunately, it was too late. The lightning struck down one after another, as if it would never stop. The thunder in the sky became more and more frequent. At first, there were red, purple, white, and all kinds of lightning. Even some that should not have appeared in the heavenly tribulation appeared. The lightning pressure around them was so thick that it was hard to breathe. Slowly, the lightning became smaller. However, it wasn't that the heavenly Tao let these people off. It was purposely reducing the lightning tribulation. Like a soft knife cutting flesh, it struck slowly. Yet because of the first few lightning strikes, Yutzong and the others had no strength to resist. They could only let the lightning slowly disperse the little immortal force left in their bodies. Lone Moon's mouth twitched. How much did they hate these people? Even the unconscious heavenly Tao was angered to the point of using such a despicable move. Moreover, this lightning tribulation had been striking for too long. One strike had lasted for several months. At first, they were watching with great interest, but as time went on, they became annoyed. It wasn't until 3 months later that the thunderclouds in the sky slowly dispersed, and the once majestic Haoran court had been flattened. The entire mountain was only left with a small layer of the sea, and it wasn't even as big as the nearby islands. As for the original disciples, other than a few disciples with especially low cultivation bases who survived, including Yutzong and the rest, they all turned into that thick layer of dust on the ground. I Ching sensed for a moment before saying, the nomological power of this small world has already recovered by half. Why is it only half? Lone Moon stared blankly for a moment, and then he realized that the nomological power that had just disappeared here was surging towards the north in large swathes, beginning to gather into thunderclouds. His eyes lit up instantly. Those tribulation clouds are floating towards divine imperial sect. Indeed, the heavenly Tao remembered every debt clearly and had already gone to collect it. Come, let's go to divine imperial sect to watch the show. But... Fatty pointed at the sea ahead hesitantly. What about that ferocious beast? Although Weeping Beast was a shut-in beast, it was still an ancient ferocious beast. Lone Moon frowned. This was indeed a problem. That beastie still had to be dealt with. I think we don't have to care about it, Chef suddenly said. Although Weeping Beast likes to eat flesh and blood, it was originally a ferocious beast with Yin Chi as its soul, Blood Chi as its spirit, and Turbid Grievous Chi as its bones. Now that Hao Ran Court is gone, the corpses that filled the Lotus Pond have also disappeared. It won't be long before the Yin Chi astral winds on the Uncrooked Sea dissipate, and Weeping Beast will naturally disappear as well. Lone Moon stared blankly. You mean, the Yin Chi on the sea came from that Lotus Pond? I Ching nodded. Shit. Lone Moon couldn't help but scold that bunch of scum from Hao Ran Court again. Indeed, they skinned a person alive so many times, and even piled the corpse at the bottom of the pond. It would be strange if it didn't generate grievous chi. What's more, the corpse could not be buried, and emitted Yin Chi all year round, causing the entire sea region to be bewildered. Weeping Beast did not suddenly appear, but was born from the Yin Chi. And the reason why the nomological powers of this world were in chaos was also very clear. Yuzong and the others used the flesh and blood of Fatty's many previous lives as sacrifices, causing the heavenly Tao to mistakenly think that they were Fatty, and to raise their cultivation and ascend to the immortal realm. By the time the heavenly Tao realized that something was wrong, it was already too late. What's more, the heavenly Tao did not have sentience. At most it was a super calculator that specialized in recording the rewards and punishments of living beings. After such a number of times, it naturally froze. In a situation where there was no other effective solution, it could only directly lock the realm gate to prevent more such situations from happening. Chapter 497. That's right. Lone Moon suddenly thought of something and asked, where did Fatty get all that merit from? Yuzong and the others probably used that merit to deceive the heavenly Tao. And he actually has it in his body in every lifetime. How much merit did he have to be able to withstand the consumption of so many lifetimes? The master and disciple both stiffened for a moment, then squeezed out an innocent smile. I don't know, don't mind such details, Father Nyo, do you want to eat a fruit? Master is right, Father Nyo, do you want to eat a pastry? Lone Moon's expression darkened and he looked at the two suspiciously. Are the two of you hiding something from me? No. *2*, they said it in unison, resolute and resolute. Ha ha ha. There definitely was. He was just about to lose his temper when the realm gate opened and Fatty's figure slowly rose from below. His immortal bones were already formed, the original spirit chi in his body began to transform into immortal chi. Perhaps because immortal chi was more concentrated than spirit chi, with this transformation, even Fatty's figure began to change. The most obvious change was that the circles of fat on his body disappeared. Fatty, who originally weighed more than 150 kilograms, became thinner at a speed visible to the naked eye. So he really was not growing fat but spirit chi. Lone Moon sighed and walked forward directly. The welcoming light around him also began to disappear, revealing a figure that had shrunk by half, and a simple but extraordinarily familiar face. Lone Moon's feet stopped, his eyes widened abruptly, staring at that face that was so familiar that it made his teeth itch. Instantly, he felt a mouthful of blood rush up his throat. He almost could not help but throw the fan in his hand. Fiend God! Holy shit! When he turned back, he realized that the master and disciple were already long gone. Damn it, he was going to kill those two little bastards. Fatty, on the other hand, was stunned. Once he saw the person in front of him, he immediately ran toward Lone Moon happily. Master, I successfully flew, get lost. From now on, you're expelled from the sect. No, Master. Father Nyo had been very irritable recently. He even felt like beating someone up, especially a certain two wastrels. It was obvious that the two of them had long guessed that Fatty was the reincarnation of the demon god, but they didn't tell him until they ascended. This was too much. Father no, don't worry about such details, okay? Shining chewed on her fruit and comforted him. Yes, Father no, I only guessed it when I was at the bottom of the lotus pond. I Ching also persuaded. Besides, a fatty is a fatty, and a demon god is a demon god. They are two completely different people now. Master is right. Let bygones be bygones. Besides, Fatty doesn't remember. Lone Moon scanned the master and disciple coldly before replying, Scram. Don't think I'll give you another cent for your food expenses. No wonder his physique was so special. No wonder his bones were so rich in merit in every life. He was the god of creation, and he had protected the plane for so long. It would be strange if his merit wasn't deep. Moreover, he was originally the god who controlled the heavenly Tao, so it was not strange that the heavenly Tao would open back doors for him everywhere. Although he understood the logic, he was still unhappy, okay? Even though he was no longer the god of creation, even though he understood that Fatty was just Fatty, when he thought about how the person he had worked so hard to teach all these years was actually the god fiend who had cheated him countless times in the past, he had the urge to shove Fatty back into the lower realm. Who cares who? I don't want to care anymore. Master. Fatty, who had no idea what was going on, looked confused. Why did Master suddenly look so scary when he looked at him? Although Loneman's attitude towards him in the past was not very good, it was not this serious. In fact, if Fatty made any big movements, he would receive a 360-degree death stare from Master. Could it be that the situation of his immortal ascension was wrong? Or did he miss something? Fatty's heart was bitter. He hugged his fat self, heart aching for him. He could only shrink in a corner of the immortal boat and tremble, afraid that Lone Moon would kick him off the boat. Perhaps because the pressure was too great, and in addition to the fact that he was hiding in a corner, there was nothing else to do other than cultivate. Fatty shrunk back, and returned to his original size. And he seemed to be a few kilograms heavier than before. Shening, Ching, even though he was not broad-minded, he was still fat. He was indeed a bull. Perhaps it was because his current image was too different from that treacherous god-fiend of the past. Loneman's anger finally subsided a little. His expression also softened a little. At least he did not want to throw Fatty off the boat every now and then. Seeing this, Fatty suddenly understood something. So the reason why Master was angry was because he had lost so much weight. Was that why Master felt sorry for him? At that moment, Fatty's heart was filled with gratitude. He silently decided in his heart that he was determined to maintain his figure from now on. He no longer looked at Lone Moon with fear in his eyes. No matter how cold and cruel Fatty stared at him, Fatty looked back at him passionately. His eyes sparkled. Lone Moon could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. Goosebumps rose all over his body. Could Fatty's brain have gone haywire after being beaten up by him? Humph. The god fiend was indeed a pervert. Fatty ascended to the East Sui country. As they were not in a rush, the few of them took the immortal boat back to the invincible immortal palace in the 9 heavens. Although they had stayed in the lower realm for many years, due to the time difference, they had only left for less than 2 days. After arriving in the upper realm, they were delayed for quite a long time. Lone Moon originally wanted to hand Fatty over to Yu Hong. After asking, he found out that Yu Hong had gone to another continent to do business. Even Siyu was not around. They had no choice but to return to the back of the palace to rest. Once they entered, they found a pile of all kinds of small animals in front of them. They were stacked on top of each other, filling up the entire courtyard. They could not even see the door. From time to time, they could hear a few pitiful cries. What is this? Lone Moon's expression darkened. Who put all these animals here? Wait, why were these animals faintly emitting blue god power? These are divine beasts. Exalted goddess, you're back. Little Black jumped out of nowhere. Perhaps because he had married Yu Hong, he had the confidence of one of their own. He did not even tremble when he saw Shining. He glanced at the animals in the house. As if he had guessed what they were thinking, he explained, "Oh, these were sent by a person called Hong Mang. He said they are for you, exalted goddess." Hong Mang. Lone Moon paused. Only then did he remember about the other plane. Their plane was opened by Shining, so Hong Mang would indeed send some things over from time to time. But there was no need for him to send so many at once, right? It was enough to last them for a few years. Ever since you left, he would come here every morning to look for you, exalted goddess. Little Black continued. And the more he sent, the more he sent. That's why they piled up like this. Chapter 498. Lone Moon glanced at the master and disciple duo, who were trying their best to stuff a mountain of small animals into their own storage bags, with a look of pleasant surprise on their faces. They were even pulling Fatty along to help. He turned and asked Little Black, did he leave any message? Hong Mang came so frequently, there must be something important. Little Black thought about it, then nodded. I think he said that he would wait for exalted goddess in some outer realm. Outer realm. Lone Moon was stunned. Could it be the divine realm? Shining left an entrance to the plane door there. It seemed like Hong Mang really had something important to do. He frowned and asked Little Black to bring Fatty down to find a place to stay. He went forward to help Shining and the others put away the ingredients in front of them. He explained the situation and then opened the passage to the divine realm. Hong Mang was indeed in the divine realm. He was sitting anxiously on the grass beside the plane tree. He seemed to have waited for a long time. The grass around him was almost flattened by him. Lord, you're finally back. Seeing them appear, Hong Mang's face lit up. He immediately got up and walked over. Hey! Air! Mang Mang! Shining waved. Hong Mang, Lone Moon, Qing, can you have a name that you can remember? Exalted goddess, my name is Hong Mang. Hong Mang frowned as he answered. Oh. Shining nodded. I've received your little animals, Mang Mang. They all look good. Thank you, Mang Mang. All right, as long as you're happy. Hong Mang, do you have something important to tell me this time? Lone Moon stepped forward and went back to the topic at hand. Yes, something important. Hong Mang shook off the thoughts of Mang Mang and then cupped his fists towards them seriously. I'm here this time because something happened in our plane. I have no choice but to ask for your help, Lord, and your two assistants. What happened to your plane again? Didn't it just reopen and start to breed living creatures? There can't be invaders, right? His expression changed. That's not it. Hong Mang shook his head. Our plane has just been reborn. We didn't attract any invaders. Others wouldn't like it either. What's going on? Hong Mang's expression changed. He looked at them awkwardly, then said with some guilt, it's like this. Ever since we planted the plane origin, the living beings that originally belonged to our plane have indeed returned to the plane through the origin. But, there's a small problem. What small problem? Lone Moon frowned. The creatures in the origin have been lost in the turbidity for a long time, so they will more or less be infected with some ruthless energy. In order to guide the creatures, a new order must be created. However, ancient gods of creation like us cannot directly interfere with the matters of the plane. Thus, the other 12 decided to enter the cycle of reincarnation and reincarnate as ordinary creatures to guide everyone. And then, there was a small problem. Hong Meng looked anxious again. After they reincarnated, they lost their memories. Although I'm guiding them in the dark, I'm not strong enough and I can't take care of everything. Plus, I can't interfere directly, so the new order has never been established. He looked up at the three expectantly. The planes of the few lords have stabilized now. So may I be so bold to ask the three of you to follow me there and help me one more time? You mean, you want us to help you rebuild the heavenly Tao? Yes, yes, yes. Hong Meng nodded vigorously. Not going. Lone Moon rejected instantly. Ah. Ah. Hong Meng was stunned. His expression fell. That's your own plane's matter. Solve it yourselves. Did he really think they were doing charity? But, go, Father No. Shining suddenly spoke. Shining. Lone Moon glared at her. The last time he helped, you went straight into hibernation. Who knew what would happen this time? It's all right. Shining took a bite of her fruit and tilted her head. Also, we've already kept the little animals. Lone Moon's expression darkened. Then go back. The master and disciple hurriedly pressed down on their storage bags and took a step back together. Shining. These two bastards. Were they trying to anger him to death? Just as he was about to fly into a rage, Chef's voice sounded in his ear. Father No, do you remember what Senior Shenjing said when Master took over this plane? Lone Moon glared at him and replied casually. What has that got to do with this? Didn't Shenjing strongly oppose her taking over? She even said that if she really wanted the plane, she might as well split it herself. He stopped halfway and widened his eyes. Holy shit. Are you serious? I Ching nodded seriously. That plane wasn't formed naturally. It was split by Master. Which means that Master is actually the manager there. Although we're not the plane's assistants, if something happens there, it would affect Master too. Damn it. Shining was such a hands-off boss. Wasn't it enough to dump one plane? Was she going to dump another one? Lone Moon took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. Which meant that they had to care about this. Father No, why don't you eat a fruit to calm down? Shining hurriedly handed a fruit over. Lone Moon glared at her. Don't give me a green one if you can. Do you think I'm fatty? Air. Shining could only shrink back. All right. Lone Moon then turned to look at Hong Meng. We'll help you one more time. Hong Meng's face was wild with joy. Although he didn't know why he suddenly changed his mind, he still cupped his fists and bowed solemnly. Thank you, sirs. He hurriedly turned and opened the plane gate, as if afraid that they would change their minds. Chef! Shining suddenly turned and said, call Fatty over too. Yes, Master. Wait. Lone Moon faltered. Why do you call Fatty? Yet I Ching's figure flashed. In the next moment, he had already pulled the confused Fatty back. He has experience. Shining replied. Lone Moon still didn't agree. He did have experience in the past, but now he's already no longer a god fiend. Before he finished speaking, Shining suddenly raised her hand and pointed at Fatty's head. The thick immortal chi on Fatty's body suddenly disappeared. Instead, it faintly revealed an even more shocking aura, just like Hong Meng beside him. Shining regained Fatty's ability as a creation god. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. All right, as long as you guys are happy. Only Fatty, who didn't know what was going on, looked confused. He looked around and then at the few of them. Where was this? What just happened? Let's go. Go. To where? Who can explain this to me? The three people in front had already turned and walked through the glowing white door. Fatty looked around and had no choice but to follow them in. The white light flashed in front of them, and the world in front of them changed. Before the few of them could see clearly, they heard a rumbling sound beside their ears. Something was smashing straight towards them. Chapter 499. The array formation around them was instantly activated, and a layer of transparent defensive array directly enveloped them inside. Only then did they see clearly that it was a fireball that had just fallen. There was a commotion in front of them. There were several groups of figures fighting in the air, spells and divine artifacts flying everywhere. The ground was scorched, and from time to time, there would be lightning or various spells falling. That was how the fireball fell. Everyone. What's going on? Hong Meng's face paled. He almost forgot that he had set up the exit here. He hurriedly said with some embarrassment and panic, "I'm sorry, sir. I opened the exit in the wrong direction. Please come this way." With that said, he immediately turned and opened up a spatial tunnel. The few of them looked at him suspiciously, then turned and walked in, leaving this battlefield. The scenery in front of them changed again, and in the next instant, they were already in a place surrounded by purple mist. A tall palace stood in front of them, and there were 3 golden words written on top, Purple Night Palace. The few of them followed in and sat down in the main hall. Lone Moon then said, "Tell me, what's the situation here? Why can't the order of the heavenly Tao be established?" Hong Meng's body trembled. After a while, he gritted his teeth and finally explained the situation of this plane in detail. In short, this plane was just a coffee table, and on it were all cups and cutlery. Originally, with Shen Ying's help, the plane had already been re-established. Furthermore, they were the gods of creation from the previous generation, so they had experience in rebuilding order. Actually, as long as they did not deliberately interfere, when the original purple source was completely integrated into this plane, living beings would naturally be born. It would even be like the other plane, extending more and more small worlds. But this process was very long. It could take hundreds of millions or even tens of billions of years. Hong Meng and the others waited patiently at first, but looking at the empty plane, they inevitably felt a little lonely. When people were lonely, it was easy to get into trouble. So they started to make trouble. In the beginning, he was only trying to reverse nurture the thin and weak original purple chi, hoping that it would grow faster. Of course, they did not do anything too overboard. After all, it was the foundation of the existence of living beings in this plane. And their method was effective. Slowly, new living beings were born in the plane. First, there were divine races like dragons and phoenixes, but because the original purple source was not strong enough. That was why these creatures only had physical forms, but no spiritual awareness. For example, last time he sent over a chicken that could lay spirit stones. Oh, no, it was a phoenix. That was how it came about. Later, as the origin violet chi became more and more solid, some intelligent creatures began to appear. Many races appeared, and most importantly, the human race began to appear. However, because the soul in the source was summoned from the primal chaos, it was able to absorb the soul. More or less, there would be some residual chaos chi. This chaos chi would need to be reincarnated in the original source purple chi for many years before it would slowly disappear. However, due to loneliness, these creatures appeared in the world ahead of time. Due to the influence of primal chaos chi, they were somewhat violent in nature and possessed divine power. One race was stronger than the other. As a result, the naturally weak human race was pushed to the edge of survival, and there were a few times when they were almost completely exterminated. Of course, every plane had different races, so it didn't matter if there was one more or one less. But humans were different. Perhaps because this plane was split by Shening, the pattern here was more or less similar to I Ching's plane. The human race was weak, but they had strong reproductive abilities. What's more, the lifespan of mortals was less than 100 years. Wave after wave, they could soon bring all the original creatures back to this plane. In addition, the original source purple chi was equivalent to the river of forgetfulness. The more souls flowed in it, the stronger it became. While the other races were strong, they could live for thousands or tens of thousands of years. What's more, they could only give birth to 1 or 2 offspring every few thousand years. Some could only give birth to 1 or 2 children in their lifetime. In comparison, the living creatures could not circulate at all. Instead, it would increase the burden on the original source purple chi. This was also why, although the human race was weak, they were often favored by the heavenly Tao. Reproduction was the foundation of all living creatures. It was a pity that the main force, the human race, could not continue to survive under the threat of the other races. Hong Meng and the others then realized the seriousness of the problem. They hurriedly separated the human race from the other races. But the heavenly Tao was still not completely established. Without the human race, the other races were still in chaos. Looking at the mess of the plane, they were a little afraid. They did not dare to interfere casually. They were afraid that if they were not careful, it would be like the original source purple chi. They would almost cause the extinction of the human race. But there was still no hope of a new order being established. As long as the heavenly Tao was not established, the plane would be faced with countless dangers. So they thought of a way. They directly entered the reincarnation cycle and became a part of the heavenly Tao. Then, they would use their reincarnated bodies to lead the races to dispel the turbid air and establish a new order. So they only left Hong Meng alone. They chose the 12 strongest races and entered the reincarnation cycle one after another. But while the ideal was rich, the reality was harsh. The 12 people who entered the reincarnation cycle were no longer the 12 ancient gods of the past. Having lost their memories, they forgot their mission. And because they were born with strong spirits, they quickly became the strongest in the race. Then, they started fighting amongst themselves. No matter how Hong Meng explicitly hinted or reminded them in a roundabout way of their previous mission, none of the 12 paid attention to him. They completely threw themselves into the new life. They directly led their race and provoked a full-scale war between the various races of the plane. This war was obviously going to reach the side of the human race again. In addition, more and more living beings returned to the original source purple chi from the chaos. The souls piled up in the original source became more and more abundant. But there was no place for them to be born here. This was no longer a matter of strengthening the original source purple chi. It was a matter of the original source purple chi exploding. Hong Meng really had no choice but to run to Shining to ask for help. "Are you all retarded?" Lone Moon glared at him. Even back then, Shining only dared to ask Chef to rewind. Where did they get the confidence to think that after reincarnation, they would still be the same people as before? This is the small problem you were talking about? No wonder they came to the battlefield the moment they came. The entire plane was probably almost destroyed, right? Wait. He suddenly thought of something. Those little animals that you bribed Shining with, don't tell me you picked them up in the war. Hong Meng stiffened. His face paled. He looked at him weakly. How can that be, Assistant Lone Moon? Ha 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 ha. It was obviously the case. For all, #forget it. He sighed. Since you already found out that the 12 people did not go according to plan, and even aggravated the seriousness of the matter, why didn't you just make a move? Even if you can't make them come back, it would be good for them to be reincarnated as humans. He was an ancient god. This was something he could do. It would not cause the situation to worsen. Air. Chapter 500. Hong Meng's smile stiffened. He shifted uneasily on the chair. Actually, I tried, but he didn't continue speaking. His whole body shrunk, and his face was so ashamed that his head almost dropped to the ground. Lone Moon paused. Something connected in his mind. You didn't get beaten up by them, did you? He lowered his head even more. Holy shit. You really lost. What happened to being an ancient god? Even Fatty's face has been thrown away by you guys, okay? My lord. Hong Meng's face was completely red, and his eyes darted around as if he wanted to find a hole to hide in. When they entered reincarnation, in order to suppress those races more conveniently, they reincarnated with their cultivation. So. Lone Moon stood up abruptly. Those 12 people are still at the ancient god level. Yes. Yes. Heh, goodbye. Lone Moon turned to leave. No. Hong Meng hugged his leg and turned to look at Shining. Milord promised to help me. Why are you hugging my leg when you're begging her? Lone Moon tried to pull his leg away. She promised. Go find her and ask her to help you find those 12 people. You caused this yourselves. I'm not going to care. 12, a certain someone who was chewing on a fruit paused. It sounded troublesome. He stood up immediately and said seriously, Father Nyo is right. We can't do anything about this. Chef, go home and cook. Yes, master, no problem, master. Hong Meng. What happened to help? This is not just because of the lack of order. It's because of the birth of spiritual awareness. Fatty suddenly spoke. Hong Meng paused and turned to look. What do you mean? Aren't they the first living beings born in this world? Fatty explained matter-of-factly. Let's not talk about the influence of the turbid chi. Whether it's demon beasts or humans, if there's no guidance, they won't naturally know what order is, right? Causing chaos and getting rid of dissidents is just their survival instinct. Fatty continued. Because no one tells them what's right and wrong. Even if the heavenly Tao were to punish them, they wouldn't know where they were wrong. Therefore, what they lacked was not order, but people who could teach them what order was. Hong Meng was stunned. That was indeed the case. The reason why the 12 ancient gods reincarnated back then was to guide the various races to cultivate normally and end the chaos. It was just that they had gone astray as well. But, I'm afraid that if I continue to interfere. He was really afraid that the more he helped, the more it would become messy. It was already a mess. Aren't you just trying to establish order? Fatty wasn't as worried as him. The situation can't get any worse. Why don't we just tell them what they should do? Ha! Hong Meng was still a little confused. What did that mean? Fatty means. Lone Moon sighed and said, you should open a school first. What do you mean by call? Perhaps it was because Hong Meng was crying out too miserably, and this plane was indeed related to Shining. Lone Moon did not manage to leave. He had agreed to help him rebuild the heavenly Tao. Fatty was right. The reason why it was a mess down there was not only because these races were affected by the remnant chi of chaos and were indeed cruel by nature. More importantly, there was no one who could suppress them and teach them how to be human. No, teach them how to be gods. That's right, those races that were fighting fiercely were all divine races. Originally, Hong Meng and the others had this opportunity because no matter how strong the divine races were, in the eyes of the dozen or so ancient gods, they were just a piece of cake. But Hong Meng was scared out of his wits by the fact that the human race was almost wiped out. He was too afraid that this plane that they had so painstakingly found would be destroyed by them before it could even grow up. What's more, This world had not formed the heavenly Tao yet, so they could not predict the future. That was why they came up with the reincarnation plan to reduce the impact. In the end, the matter was not resolved, and they even lost their own people. They really did not interfere when they should, and blindly interfered when they shouldn't. The best way now was to build a platform for them to coexist peacefully, and teach them how to love each other, to build a harmonious and stable big plane. Therefore, on the third day of their arrival, the Invincible Civil and Military School Purple Knight Palace branch was officially established. This time, they changed the rules for the selection of principals. Whoever won would be the principal. Shining lost unsurprisingly, and Chef, because he was holding a spatula, could only use a rock. Lone Moon could not help but use a cloth out of reflex, so the position of the principal naturally fell on Lone Moon's head. As for Hong Meng and Fatty, one had a criminal record, and the other's looks really affected the school's image, so they were directly disqualified from playing rock paper scissors. To show his seriousness, Lone Moon personally changed the signboard of the Purple Knight Palace to Invincible Civil and Military School Purple Knight Palace branch, and also watched as Hong Meng changed the square in front of the hall into a huge square that could accommodate tens of thousands of people. He originally wanted to put some chairs, but thinking of the divine race's thick skin and flesh, forget it, he let them stand. The school's transformation was complete. Next was the problem of recruiting students. Will they come? Hong Meng asked worriedly. Nonsense. Of course not. Ha. Ah. Hong Meng paused. Then all this we did, isn't it? For nothing. You didn't even put up a single advertisement. Who would know that you opened a school? Lone Moon rolled his eyes at him. Don't just grow old, don't grow a brain. Once we put up an advertisement, people will naturally come. What was an advertisement? Did it mean to advertise widely? Then how should we put up an advertisement? A fight is the best advertisement. What? Lone Moon ignored him and asked, tell me, what are the names of those 12 traitorous grandsons? Call them over, let Chef beat them up, then they will naturally not dare to do anything rash, then teach them. Teach them until they learn well. He spoke seriously. This was not the time when he opened a sect, there was no competition, there was no need to consider reputation and such. Didn't you say that they are the leaders of the 12 races? If they stay here, the others will naturally come. Hong Meng thought about it, it seemed right. Then how do we call them over? Just directly issue a battle notice. Didn't most leaders care about their reputation? With that said, he raised his hand and produced a piece of paper, channeled his god power, and directly wrote, his words sharp, full of provocation, as mean could be, the kind that anyone who saw it would have a stomach full of anger. Then, he made 11 copies of it, stuffed it to Hong Meng, and let him distribute it. Chapter 501. Hong Meng sneaked a glance and immediately closed it again. Luckily it wasn't for him. He would be furious after reading it. Then, he conjured a seal and cast a spell. More than 10 battle invitations turned into flashes of light and flew out. The battle was set for the next day. As divine beings, he was not afraid that they could not make it. Even if the 12 of them joined forces, he did not think that Chef would lose based on his abilities. It was not that he was bragging, but he could crush them all. Even if there was an accident, there was still Shining. So Lone Moon was not worried at all. Then, on the second day, no one came. Lone Moon looked at the empty square, not knowing how to react. Could it be that they were too far and could not make it? No matter, he could wait another day. On the third day, they still did not come. Could it be that the divine beings here did not have the basic ability to cut through the void? On the fourth day, they still did not come. Could it be that the battle invitations were delayed and something went wrong with Hong Meng's spell? On the 10th day, they still did not come. Could it be that they were scared out of their wits by his battle invitations? On the 15th day, they still did not come. Lone Moon, Qing, Hong Meng, Fatty, the square, which could accommodate 10,000 people, was completely empty. A faint cold wind blew past, sending chills down one's spine. Holy shit, they actually dared to stand me up. Lone Moon's expression darkened and he pulled out his sword. Hong Meng, tell me where they are. He was going to destroy them. Father No. Shining, who was nibbling on a fruit at the side, suddenly spoke. What? Those people are the first batch of indigenous people of this plane, right? So what? Can't I beat them up? No, this world has not even established rules. There is nothing. That includes words, right? Ha! You used the language of that plane to write the battle invitations. Can they understand it? Lone Moon, Iching, Hong Meng. Fatty, swoosh, 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 swoosh. The 4 top experts were stabbed by a knife at the same time. A place called IQ suddenly ached. Although they did not want to admit it, at this moment, they were all idiots. 12 Divine Race Encampment. Half a month ago, something strange happened in the various god clans. A divine object fell from the sky and landed in front of the clan leader. The divine item was squarish and crimson, with a faint golden glow on its body. It was as if it had a mind of its own. Whenever other clansmen approached it, it would fly away and land in the hands of the clan leader. The chief observed it day and night for 10 days and still did not know what it was. When he unintentionally opened it, he saw a long white scroll covered with tiny golden marks. Their appearances were extremely strange, and they would even float up from the god artifact one by one. They floated in the air and radiated light for a long time without falling. They were like glowing insects, emitting radiance in the dark night. It won't disappear until it's closed. The various races were astonished. Indeed, things that fell from the sky were extraordinary. There must be other uses for such a divine object. Thus, after one side investigated, they discovered that all 12 Protoss had received the exact same item. As they didn't like each other, they had a small fight every 3 days and a big fight every 5 days. The 12 god clans, who had a reason to fight and who had no reason to create a reason to fight, felt that they had to fight for such a good thing. Thus, without any doubt, without hesitation, the 12 god clans started fighting again. Chef, who finally reacted and was sent by Father Nyo to personally challenge them, should he rush up and beat them up now? Or should he wait for them to finish fighting, then rush up and beat them up? Chef looked at the sky one last time, calculated the time for dinner and decided not to wait. Thus, he directly went up and beat up the leaders of the 12 god clans one by one. He also took care of a few beasts that were not afraid of death and rushed up to him on their own accord, bringing them back to roast. Then, he looked at the Protoss who were lying on the ground trembling in fear. He took out a stack of paper, one for each person, and forced them over. As he did so, he said with a serious expression, "Invincible Civil and Military School Purple Knight Palace Branch, understand? All the gods." Only when he finished handing out the thick stack of paper did he turn around and tie up the 12 leaders like he was wrapping dumplings. He said word by word, "The few of you must understand." With that said, he dragged a string of people and flew away. The originally noisy scene fell into a strange silence. After a long time, the Protoss finally dared to get up. They looked down at the things that were forced into their hands. Instantly, a voice rang in everyone's ears. It was obvious that someone had learned his lesson last time. Not only could this advertisement be seen, but it could also be transmitted. A low and deep voice shouted from inside. Invincible Civil and Military School Purple Knight Palace Branch is a multifaceted, modern, all-round civil and military school dedicated to training high-end talents of the Protoss and building a perfect new world. Our school now has 5 teachers. 4 of them graduated from the management college in another plane, and 1 of them studied in the same college. All of them have almost perfect teaching experience, as well as perfect personal skills and near-perfect teaching methods. That voice came one after another, with a motivational quality that could not be ignored. Everyone who heard it looked confused, but they could not help but feel an impulse for no reason, especially the last sentence. Do you want to become a stronger Protoss? Do you want to be the best among the Protoss? Do you want to be the strongest Protoss? Do you want to be as powerful as the person who beat up your clan leader? Come to Invincible Civil and Military School Purple Knight Palace Branch. Invincible Civil and Military School Purple Knight Palace Branch is your wisest choice. As long as you study here, you will become the strongest king. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and pick up the electricity beside you. Apui, come directly to Invincible Civil and Military School Purple Knight Palace Branch. Address: Purple Knight Palace, right above Purple Cloud Mountain. Limited places, first come, first served. The Protoss all looked at each other, the passionate advertising message reverberating in their ears. After a long while, someone finally whispered. Is this true? Isn't the one who lives in Purple Knight Palace the old man who often comes to the battlefield to steal corpses and was beaten up by the clan leader? But that person just now was really powerful. Since the clan leader is not here, should we go and take a look? Thus, Invincible Civil and Military School Purple Knight Palace Branch finally successfully recruited its first batch of students. Lone Moon asked Chef to force the sound leaflet, and the publicity was quite effective. After I Ching kidnapped the leaders of the 12 races, within a few days, a large group of Protoss arrived in front of the palace. From a rough look, there were tens of thousands of people. Perhaps it was because Chef happened to be on the battlefield when he beat them up. At that time, there were many people, and the effect of the advertisement was maximized. These people did not retreat at all, but directly turned around and came to Purple Knight Palace. Chapter 502. Although most of these students were not really here to learn, they just wanted to see the situation. Some even wanted to save the 12 people, of course, most of them were here to watch the show. Lone Moon did not care so much, since they were here, they could not leave. Lone Moon asked Hong Meng to expand the square by 10 times, and then directly set up layers of arrays outside, locking all the divine race people inside. To put it nicely, closed education. With students in the venue, the next step was to officially start teaching. Lone Moon then thought of a major problem: these people did not have any foundation. It was not that they did not have the foundation of cultivation, but they did not even have the basic foundation of words, and even because of the influence of the chaotic aura, there might even be problems with their understanding. Because of this, the few of them had to hold a board meeting. These divine race people obviously had to start from the most basic literacy, but the key was who would teach them. I feel that the teaching standards and methods of our previous world are still more advanced. Lone Moon glanced at Shining. Shining, I have learned for hundreds of years and have forgotten most of it, why not you teach? Ha! Shining, who was suddenly called, was stunned. We are not learning the same system, are you sure you want me to teach? Shit! He almost forgot that she was only a student on Earth. She even had to repeat a year in primary school. Then what should we do? Chef, you do it. I also do not remember much about enlightenment. Chef shook his head. Lone Moon could only look at Hong Meng. I remember even longer. He hurriedly shook his hand. On the other hand, Fatty raised his hand weakly. Master, what, you want to teach? No. Fatty shook his head. I want to say, what do you think of Brother Rabbit? Lone Moon, Ching, Shining. Lone Moon stood up and patted Fatty's shoulder. Fatty, it's been so long. You finally said something sensible. Was Master praising him or scolding him? Lone Moon did not delay and directly returned to the other plane, entered the previous small world and went to the southern land, and appeared in front of the blissfully eating carrots in the Demon Monarch Palace. The rabbit's paws trembled and it almost fell off the throne. Great! Great! Great immortal, why are you? Before it could finish speaking, Lone Moon pulled its ear over and said seriously, Rabbit, I'm giving you a chance to ascend to immortality. Oh, no, I'm giving you a chance to become a god. Do you want it? Ah, dong. This time, the rabbit really fell down. Was it hallucinating? Is identical to, it was stunned for a long time before it nodded stiffly. Yes. I do, but it was just a rabbit. Becoming an immortal was already an extravagant hope, let alone becoming a god. As long as you think about it, I'm leaving. Lone Moon did not waste any more time talking nonsense with it. He picked up the rabbit and left. The rabbit was dumbfounded. By the time it reacted, it had already been thrown in front of a large group of strange animals. There were so many of them that it couldn't even see the end of them, and every single one of them was emitting a divine aura that made it tremble with fear. Rabbit's legs turned to jelly. If not for Lone Moon holding onto it, it would have fallen to the ground. They were all gods. Had it arrived at the god realm? Rabbit wanted to faint for a moment. Obviously, Lone Moon did not give it the chance. He directly stuffed a book into its hands. Here, this is the teaching material. You just need to teach them how to read for a while. Ha! The rabbit had not recovered from its daze. Read? Divine race. It. Great. Great immortal, no, great god. I'm just a rabbit. Why? You can't read. I can read. This was not a question of whether it could read or not, right? Besides, why couldn't the divine race read? That's good. I'll leave it to you, Rabbit. Lone Moon patted its shoulder and directly grabbed it and flew up to a high platform. He even set up several layers of arrays for it. The rabbit only felt that the divine aura that was suppressing it and suffocating it disappeared in an instant. When it regained its senses, Lone Moon was already gone. Only the rabbit was left standing high up on the platform. Below it was a black mass of divine race army that stretched as far as the eye could see. The rabbit's legs began to tremble again. Was this some ultimate test that Great Immortal had set for it? But since it was already here, it could only bite the bullet. With trembling hands, it flipped open the book. It was indeed a beginner's book. It was simple and easy to understand. It even had pictures. It wiped the cold sweat from its forehead and gritted its teeth. It turned around and sat on the praying mat on the platform. Almost instantly, an array was activated under its feet. A virtual image of it appeared in the sky. That image was very wide, almost covering the entire square. It appeared clearly in front of the students of the various races. The various races, who had never seen such high technology, were stunned. They quieted down immediately and looked up at the virtual image in the sky in shock. At the same time, the rabbit's voice was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. The rabbit flipped open the book in its hands. Instantly, the contents of the book appeared in the air, like a PowerPoint presentation. Cough. Now, let's start the lesson. The rabbit officially began its beginner's teaching career. Hence, from then on, there would often be sounds of geese drifting through the purple night palace. grass on the plains, and so on. The rabbit was a little afraid at first. After all, it was a group of Protoss in front of it, and it was just an ordinary lop-eared rabbit that had taken the back door to reach the 12th rank. Under the suppression of their race, it was natural for them to be afraid. But after being afraid for so long, it got used to it. Zero, not only did he teach it, but he would also encourage everyone to chant along with it. In the beginning, the Protoss below also harbored a sense of curiosity and novelty, and earnestly learned from the rabbit for a few days. But after a period of time, he found that every day was boring learning how to read. Some of them even wanted to rush out of the array formation. They were used to being wild and had never been restrained. In addition, they were born valiant, so their tempers were naturally not too good. Otherwise, they wouldn't be constantly fighting and causing chaos in the world. After failing to break out of the array formation, the divine race began to target the rabbit on the high platform. He wanted to grab it and use it as a hostage, but unfortunately, he was injured by the formation on it. Since Lone Moon could bring the rabbit here without worry, he naturally had already thought of a way to deal with it. Looking at the square that was starting to be in a mess after a few days, Lone Moon directly released the head of the cult, Chef. There was only one effective way to deal with this group of troublesome students, and that was to just beat them up. Hence, after beating everyone up again, the entire teaching square was restored to order. Chef also carried his sword and patrolled the square from time to time every day. If he found someone disobedient, he would stab them with his sword. Anyway, the divine race had thick skin and flesh. Even if Chef attacked and got injured, he would recover in a few years. So in the end, whenever it opened its mouth and said, that, all the gods burst into tears. We were wrong. I won't do it again. Master, I beg you. Can we go to class normally? You're worth teaching. The rabbit nodded satisfactorily and nibbled on a carrot while it was at it. The completely unemployed teaching director I Ching, it was better for him to return to the rear hall and help his master cook. Lone Moon also expressed his approval of the quality of Rabbit's teaching. Even his attitude towards Fatty was much better. He also began to consider the idea of letting the rabbit take on a few more classes after the literacy class ended. Of course, as a reward for an outstanding employee, he waved his hand and approved Rabbit's request to open up a plot of land at the back of the mountain to plant some radishes. Hong Mang. The floor seemed to be his. Rabbit taught for a whole 3 years. As it did not stop day and night, it taught like a cramming duck. It finally allowed these tens of thousands of illiterate people to lay a good foundation of words. Especially in the later stages, when Rabbit often wanted to reason, causing them to be highly nervous. Almost all of them could repeat fluently after Rabbit said it once, or else Rabbit would say it 100 times. Lone Moon also felt that it was time to start teaching other classes, so he decided to take a break and rest for a day. It would be his turn to teach starting tomorrow. Almost at the same time that Rabbit walked down the stage, all the gods heaved a sigh of relief. Their backs that had been straight for several years were instantly lowered. Some could not bear the sudden relief and fainted directly. Too scary. Even scarier than the one with the sword. So the so-called rabbit race was actually such a scary race. All the gods trembled in fear. Rabbit, who had finally finished class, was already happily pulling his good friend Fatty to plant radishes. After all, he had eaten them for 3 years and had finished all the stock. Lone Moon was supposed to start teaching the next day, but he realized that those gods who had fainted had not regained consciousness, so he had to delay it for another day. On the 3rd day, he started the 2nd class. This time, he was the one teaching personally. The first class was about transformation. That's right, although all the gods here were born with the art of transformation, but they could only change their original form, become bigger, smaller, and different colors. For example, in the field now, everyone had compressed their bodies to become several times smaller, otherwise they would not be able to sit down at all. But none of them could transform. This so-called transformation was to transform into human form, not a simple illusion or something like a temporary image, but the entire body and meridians had to change. The reason why they had to transform into human form was because the human form was the best form for cultivation, commonly known as the Tao body. Transforming into the Tao body was the first step to entering the Tao. Lone Moon was much more straightforward than Rabbit. He directly cast a spell and transmitted the transformation method into the consciousness of all the gods. He only left a sentence, "Follow this method and cultivate by yourselves, I will come and check in 5 days." All the gods were quite happy at first. They did not expect that this new master was much more straightforward than Master Rabbit. Finally, they did not have to endure the pain of a long continuous sentence drilling into their consciousness. All the gods felt that they had seen the light of hope, until they fell back to hell 5 days later. They never thought that Lone Moon's check was a one-by-one check. If the transformation did not pass, they had to start all over again until they learned it. Not only that, his requirements for transformation were also extremely strict. It was not as simple as transforming into 4 limbs and hiding one's original form. Too tall, too thin, too fat, too ugly, too short, too... Even too little hair was not allowed. Even if the transformation clothes were ugly, it was not allowed to pass. All the gods, they kept feeling that this master was even more sick than the previous one. What should they do? Please wait online, it's quite urgent. The kind that could kill. It was not that no one resisted, but because they really could not beat him. Forced to transform hundreds of times every day. Of course there were many gods who were so irritable that they wanted to fight, but before they could get within 3 feet of him, they were beaten down. He indeed did not know how to nag like Master Rabbit, but he knew how to use poison. You transformed into such an ugly form, and you still have the nerve to show it to me. Do you want me to help you reforge? Reforge. Is your original form a pig? Are you so fat that you want to change races? Do you need me to send you into reincarnation to satisfy you? Reforge. This face of yours was transformed by that green bird just now, right? You are a mongoose, why are you trying to claim kinship with others? Reforge. And the two of you, why do you look so alike? Why do you look like a married couple in front of me? I am not even single. What right do you have to pretend to be a married couple in front of me? Reforge. Chapter 504. Towards the end, Lone Moon said coldly, "If you can't even transform properly, you can only be little animals to be eaten." Lone Moon did not know if it was because he had a problem with their low efficiency of transformation or because he was tired of beating them up so badly. At first, the races didn't know what he meant. Until the next day, he asked Chef to move the kitchen to the empty space in front of the hall. In front of the races, he took out the corpses of his kind. He began to boil water, pluck feathers, cut, fry. At a table not far away, sat a figure dressed in red, holding chopsticks and knocking on the bowl, asking from time to time, "Chef, are you done? I'm so hungry." Sigh, why did he move the kitchen? It was already a minute late. "Yes, master, I'll be done soon, master." I Ching responded, stirring the food even faster. All the races shuddered, only feeling a chill straight into their hearts. What exalted master said, little animals to be eaten, would really be eaten. So scary. "Mama, I want to go home." "No, no, no, exalted master, I want to listen to the lesson." Suddenly, all the divine races began to miss the previous exalted Master Rabbit. Being nagged was better than being eaten. What was even scarier was that they actually felt a little fragrant. Under the pressure of being eaten at any moment, all the races began a new wave of learning with all their might. Their level of effort was even more than when Rabbit was in class. Even during the 3 times Lone Moon went to eat during the break between classes, they did not forget to make use of the time to practice. Only when Rabbit occasionally strolled over, all of them gave him a nostalgic look. Rabbit was dumbfounded. Maybe this was a group of good students who remembered old times. As the saying goes, there is only motivation when there is pressure. In less than 2 years, all the divine races learned how to transform. The originally messy square instantly changed into a group of handsome men and beautiful women, looking like stars. It could be said to have set the high standards of the divine race's attractiveness. From this moment on, Lone Moon officially taught them the orthodox cultivation method. Actually, the divine race's physique was already very strong. Naturally, there was no room for improvement. The only difference was how to use their own abilities more rationally and flexibly. And these were mostly based on their own understanding. What Lone Moon mainly taught was still the way to cultivate God power. Since these gods were the first batch of living beings in the world, the primal chaos energy in their bodies had to be purged. By practicing breathing and purifying their divine power, they could achieve the effect of purging the primal chaos energy from their bodies. The reason why they were so irritable and bloodthirsty was because of the chaotic energy in their bodies. These were emotions that were almost never seen in the divine race of the other plane. To the Shin clan, who could already transform into their Taoist bodies, this was not difficult at all. After Lone Moon taught them once and told them the things to take note of, they could already understand. Furthermore, the chaotic aura in his body was indeed decreasing. However, this was a very long process that required a lot of patience and willpower. Of course, he didn't know if the other races had the patience and perseverance for his team of teachers, but it was definitely possible for them to calm down. Compared to the previous 2 classes, which were filled with people reading aloud or wailing, the entire teaching square was as quiet as a chicken. Lone Moon had nothing to do, so he released his divine perception and carefully scanned the tens of thousands of students present. He realized that there were differences between the Protoss. Apart from the previous 12, who were forced to learn and were often beaten up the most badly, the rest of the divine race were not top-notch. The cultivation levels of the other divine races were actually not the highest. Just like the dragon race, the golden dragon was the highest, the black dragon was the lowest, and all the water race had the opportunity to cultivate to become a dragon. And the phoenix race's 9-feathered phoenix was the strongest. Among them, the 9-feathered fire phoenix was the strongest. Although the other 1-feathered ones were also phoenixes, they were obviously not on the same level. It was the same for these divine races. However, the difference this time was only in terms of brute force. There was actually no technical content. So even if they attacked together, they would be easily beaten down by Chef. The only ones who knew a little about cultivation were the 12 reincarnated ones. Although they lost their memories, they retained their cultivation because they were reincarnated. So they instinctively knew some moves that others did not know. This was also the reason why they could join forces to defeat Hong Mang. So compared to directly teaching them how to cultivate and improve their martial skills, it was better to teach them how to understand the heavenly Tao. Actually, be it the so-called heavenly Tao or nomological laws, they were all the lowest standards to maintain the operation of the entire world, the endless cycle. This was like the lowest bottom line of this plane. Within this bottom line, all living beings were protected, living and multiplying, the cycle of reincarnation. There were 3,000 great Taos for you to choose, but you could not touch this bottom line. For example, like the invaders, or like divine imperial sects cheating to ascend, these were all not allowed. The former would cause the plane to be unstable. The latter disrupted reincarnation. The reason why the heavenly Tao locked that small world was actually not just because this method of ascension was evil and dishonorable, and even more not because Fatty was once a fiend god, but because they disrupted the order of reincarnation, so that souls could be directly reincarnated without going through the underworld. And it was definitely not only Fatty who was doing this. The pills that Hao Ran Court refined that contained the soul-guiding powder was the best proof. They even distributed these pills to the various sections. This way, even if they were already dead, they could use the same method to reincarnate into the same small world, and then just walk the path of cultivation again. They must have their own internal ranking to decide who could enjoy Fatty's flesh and blood first. This way, they seriously violated the Heavenly Tao's bottom line, so the Heavenly Tao directly sealed the realm gate. Don't you want to ascend? Then none of you can think of ascending. Anyway, those who had not reincarnated in the underworld were consuming their own souls. Even if they did not discover the abnormality of this small world, after a long time, the Heavenly Tao would naturally be able to make this group of people who violated the bottom line disappear forever. Thinking of this, Lone Moon heaved a sigh of relief. He knew what he had to teach these divine beings who were born at the top of the food chain. Of course, he could not directly tell them what was going on with the Heavenly Tao. He recalled the previous plane, all the concepts about the Heavenly Tao rules, and recalled some of the Taoist information that he found at Xin Ying's place. After organizing his words, he officially began his lecture. He talked about the Heavenly Tao, the Tao of all beings, human Tao, and even the Tao of self, one by one. Then, he found a few Taoist classics such as Tao Te Ching, Peace Sutra, the Tao Luan, and so on to support the stage. He first read them, but worried that they would not understand, he carefully explained them in the vernacular. Chapter 505. Although Lone Moon was already trying his best to teach, logic was logic. Actually, it still depended on the divine race's own understanding. But he did not expect that after he explained it once, there would actually be people who understood it and directly went into meditation on the square. And there were 4 or 5 divine races, the god power around them instantly became many times denser, their bodies began to appear with a soft blue light, and faintly with some heavenly power, causing the divine race beside them to jump in fright. A sense of fear extended from the bottom of their hearts, but different from the fear when they were beaten up before, there was a sense of awe. Lone Moon asked the divine race beside him to be quiet, not to disturb others in meditation, before continuing to preach. With this, more and more people went into meditation. They were divine races in the first place, naturally their qualifications were not bad. Especially after Rabbit's force-feeding teaching a few years ago, it became even easier to understand. Previously, it was only because of the influence of the remnant chaos chi. After learning to transform and regulate their breathing, this influence naturally became smaller and smaller. Looking at the square, the god power became more and more abundant, even faintly showing signs of materializing. These few days, there were even several rounds of spirit rain. Even the radishes that Rabbit planted in the back mountain matured in 4 hours. Rabbit's hands were sore from all that. Not to mention the other crazy growing divine Ganoderma and immortal herbs. I Ching really could not watch it anymore, he could only go down the mountain to set up an array, to guide the excess god power out, into the ground, or into forming immortal meridians, or into the world. He casually asked the former master of Purple Night Palace, Hong Meng, for help. But he did not move, instead looking up at the sky in a daze, his eyes wide and face full of shock, pointing shakily at the sky, revealing an expression that was uncertain whether to be surprised or happy. Lord! Lord! Heavenly! Heavenly Tao, it's starting to form. This was too fast. The flow of time here was different, and in order to stabilize the plane, Hong Meng and the others purposely accelerated the time in this side of the world. Actually, ever since Lord helped to split open the plane, it had already been millions of years. But even so, after so many years of hard work, there was no way for the heavenly Tao to be born. How long had it been, but the heavenly Tao was already showing signs of being born. I Ching looked up, sensing carefully only to discover that there was indeed a trace of nomological power in this world. His eyes darkened, he turned to look at the high platform, who was still focused on preaching, and instantly understood something. He looked at the person sprawled on the chair beside him, nibbling on a fruit. Master, could Father Nyo be? Shen Ying's hands paused. She tilted her head and said, yes, I'm a good leader. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. Raising his head once more to look at a certain person on the elevated platform, Zhang Xian sighed. What else could he do? Who asked him to be my teacher? I can only continue to spoil him. Yes, it was definitely not because Master was lazy. Lonman's lecture lasted for more than 10 years. In the beginning, he still seriously explained the textbook in detail, and occasionally interacted with the students. Seeing that more and more people were meditating, he felt a little happy. But no matter how exciting the content was, it would get annoying after 4 or 5 times. Therefore, later on, he simply changed the array formation on the high platform and stuck a few recording talismans on it. The content was the same anyway. But the amazing thing was that this kind of skimpy teaching method was really useful. More and more people were meditating, so Lone Moon continued to play the video with a peace of mind. And because they continued to absorb the God power around them as they listened to the lecture, the influence of the chaos chi in their bodies became less and less. They had long lost the fierce look on their faces when they first came here. They looked much more peaceful, and more like the real divine race. He glanced at the square. Everyone was sitting neatly. Even if they were watching the video, they were watching it seriously. There were still some people who were not meditating. Perhaps their comprehension skills were really not good enough. He thought for a moment, then opened the array formation that imprisoned them. The chaos chi in their bodies had already disappeared. Their minds were clear and their consciousness was no longer affected. Naturally, they would understand the benefits of this cultivation. Although their comprehension skills were not good, it was also a good choice to go out and develop more fellow disciples. So it was time to let them out. At first, no one dared to move. They thought it was another term assignment to loosen the reins only to grasp better. But some of the bolder ones walked out, and after realizing that everything was fine, they left one after another. The number of people meditating in the square decreased by more than half. The remaining people were only those who had not woken up from their meditation. The duration of meditation depended on each person's understanding. It could be as short as a few hours, or as long as a few hundred or even 1,000 years without waking up. The remaining people included the 12 reincarnated ancient gods. Among them, some were still meditating, and some were awake but unwilling to leave. Perhaps they understood something from listening to the lecture. That was why they did not want to leave. Lone Moon did not bother too much. The most worrying thing was still the human race below. This was the first problem that needed to be solved in this plane. The matters of the divine race were basically on the right track. There was no need to worry too much. It was time to go to the human race to take a look. He directly brought the cheat master and disciple away, leaving the other 3 behind. Now he was relieved. Although there were many divine race people in this square, Hong Meng and Fatty were both ancient gods. Even if something happened, they could at least escape. As for Rabbit, there was even less to worry about. Those divine race people now trembled when they saw it, afraid that it would speak. The psychological trauma was even more terrifying. Following the direction that Hong Meng pointed, they came to the human territory that was isolated. Only when they arrived did they realize that it was indeed far away from the battlefield of the gods. There was even a large sea area in between. The entire continent was sealed off by Hong Meng using a special sorcery, just like how Godfiend specially drew out the outer realm. The entire continent was surrounded by a huge barrier that blocked all the overly powerful living beings outside, including the divine race. Lone Moon directly released his divine perception to scan the area. He found that the situation was better than he imagined. Perhaps because Hong Meng isolated the continent in time, the number of human race people was not small. It was not smaller than the total population of the small worlds in their plane. He originally thought that he would see a primitive society. Unexpectedly, it was no different from the small worlds from before. There was even a national language and so on. Apart from the smaller scale, it was no different from the other plane. Let's go down and take a look. He pointed to the nearest forest outside the town and directly flew down. The few of them were just about to leave the forest when suddenly 4 or 5 people jumped out, looking at the 3 of them with a guarded expression. Who are you? Each of them was holding a knife, axe or other metal weapon in their hands. They all aimed at the 3 of them. Lone Moon. Were they being robbed? Chapter 506. Seeing that they didn't respond, the leader, a tall and strong man, waved the knife in his hand and shouted, "Where did you come from? Do you have a travel permit?" Travel permit? Lone Moon was stunned. So it wasn't a robbery. He quickly put on a professional smile. Big brother, who's your big brother? The man interrupted him directly, his eyes even more guarded. Cut the crap, hurry up and take the travel permit, otherwise don't blame us for being rude. Lone Moon was speechless. This was the first time in his life that he encountered a failure in a negotiation. He was just thinking about what the travel permit looked like and whether he should directly make one for the other party to see. Hurry up. Another younger man at the side also urged, and even glanced at Shining who was closest to him. Travel permit. No. Shining tilted her head, but handed over a fruit. Do you want the fruit? Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Shining. Don't make trouble, who would want your fruit, and the one in your hand, isn't it the one that wasn't ripe last time, the one that you wanted to give to him but didn't? Can't you show some sincerity when you treat people to food? He was about to explain, the man opposite glanced at the fruit, turned to the others and said, "This person is fine." With that said, he took the fruit and even pulled Shining to his side, and then continued to take out his weapon, pointing it at him and Chef. Lone Moon, Ching, how could this be freaking possible? Where's yours? The man continued to look at the two fiercely, grabbed the weapon in his hand and shouted, "Those without a travel permit are transformed from those man-eating monsters. Catch them." As soon as he finished speaking, the others all took up their weapons, ready to stab. Wait. Lone Moon thought of something in a flash, the corner of his mouth twitched, and then took out a bag of pastries and handed it over. Chef also reacted and took out half a pork knuckle. Those people took it suspiciously, picked it up and tasted it, then put away their weapons. If you have a travel permit, you should have said so earlier, it wouldn't be good if there was a misunderstanding. The leading man looked at the two with some dissatisfaction, as if blaming them for being too slow. He thought for a while and added, "But your travel permits are quite delicious, how do you make them?" Lone Moon, Iching, are you sure you're checking for directions and not robbing? Alas, the town hasn't been peaceful recently. That's why the checks on the people who come and go are stricter. The man sighed and continued, "You're not from here, right? Please don't be offended. We're doing this for the sake of the town's safety." Lone Moon regained his composure and immediately stepped forward. He resumed his businesslike smile and asked, "You're flattering me. This is how it should be. We can understand." May I ask, Big Brother, what has happened in this town? It's all because of those monsters. The man sighed and said, recently, more than a dozen people have gone missing in the town, so we are strictly checking the road passes. All right, don't stay here any longer. Hurry up and enter the city. It'll be easier to bump into them when it gets dark. After saying that, he waved his hands to urge them. Lone Moon did not continue asking. He pulled Shining and Chef towards the direction of the town. He vaguely guessed that the monster they were talking about should be something like a demon or a spirit beast. And one that could transform. But he did not know why its food was a road pass. When they reached the town, he looked up. There was indeed some demonic chi left in the town, but the demon might have already left. He turned to a peddler who wrote, selling road passes, and asked. Only then did he know that demons' food was humans, so they usually did not bring other food with them. And most demons retained their bestial nature. They were selfish and protective of their food. They would not share their food with others. So they used this method to distinguish between real and fake. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched when he heard this method. This method could at most identify some little demons who did not understand the world. If they really wanted to harm people, it would be strange if they could. But thinking about it carefully, there were no cultivators in this plane. It was already not easy for them to think of this method. Could he say that it was fortunate that there was a chef in their team? Otherwise, they would probably be thought of as accomplices of the monsters. The three of them walked around the town for a day. They basically knew the situation on the side of the human race. When Hongmeng isolated the human race, they only cared about the chaos of the divine race. They forgot that there were also demon beasts, demons, beasts, and so on in this world. So the human race was still quite dangerous. Their biggest advantage was the advantage of numbers. When they met the alien races, they basically had no power to resist. Just like the demon that had already eaten more than 10 people in this town. They might not be able to defeat it if they really faced it. The final solution was to move away from here. Therefore, the best way to solve this problem was to teach the human race how to cultivate. So that they could have the ability to protect themselves when facing demons and ghosts. In other words, their school had to continue. They might even have to open a second branch. Father Nyo, are we going to advertise again? I Ching asked subconsciously. Of course we have to advertise. Wait, why did you pull out your sword? Seeing that Chef had summoned his sword out of habit, Lone Moon hurriedly pressed it down. Not advertising. I Ching tilted his head. Tell me, who are we going to fight this time? I'll be in charge of fighting. You'll be in charge of advertising. Who said we're going to fight? No, I'm not talking about advertising. I don't mean fighting. What was he so excited about? I Ching was stunned. Didn't the divine race beat them up last time? Wasn't advertising a verb? Fighting is only suitable for the divine race. Lone Moon glared at him. How can civilized people like us draw our swords so easily? Not even a kitchen knife. Then what should we do? Same rules. Let's build a sect first. Human cultivators should be much easier to teach than the divine race. After all, people who lived under the shadow of demons and ghosts all year round should be easier to deceive, no, recruit. All right. I Ching nodded. After thinking for a while, he took out a map and said, "This is the map of the human race that I asked Hongmeng for before we left. If you want to build a sect, you can choose a location based on this map." Lone Moon took a look. Indeed, it was the whole picture of this isolated continent. It was surrounded by the sea and was independent of the entire plain. He did not choose within the continent. Instead, he chose an immortal mountain near the coast. Seeing that he had chosen, I Ching continued. When I came out, I caught a newborn immortal meridian at the foot of the mountain. If we build a sect here, we can plant the immortal meridian here. Yes, this place is isolated all year round. Compared to other places, the spirit chi is indeed too thin. Not to mention the divine race's territory that was full of god power. Not bad. It's hard for you to think of collecting an immortal meridian. Wait. Chapter 507. Lone Moon narrowed his eyes and scanned Chef from head to toe. Why do I feel like you're acting weird recently? It's one thing that you're not following Shining around and causing trouble, but you're even helping her. He was too obedient. Tell me, what did the two of you do? I Ching stiffened for a moment, still maintaining his poker face. His eyes turned towards Shining, and then he shook his head hard. No, we didn't do anything shameful. Are you wrong? You've already said it out loud. Don't turn your face away if you dare. With that said, he reached out and said, take out the storage bag. I Ching hesitated for a moment but finally handed it over. He opened it to take a look. Apart from a pile of ingredients and cooking utensils, there was only a pitiful sword stuffed in the corner. It was so clean that there wasn't even a spirit stone. Lone Moon was still worried. He turned and reached out to Shining. And yours. I don't need to go through security check, do I? Shining grabbed her bag tightly. You have to go through security check. Alright, you have to return it to me. She quickly took out a few fruits and held them in her hands before handing them over. Lone Moon opened it to take a look, and his mouth twitched. He had thought it was just an ordinary storage bag, but when he opened it, there was a huge storage space inside, almost as big as a small mystic realm. Not only that, there was really a place inside that could be planted, and a forest of spirit fruit trees. No wonder Shining didn't go to pick the fruits even though she didn't stop eating. So it was planted here. Needless to say, this small mystic realm that looked like a storage bag was definitely secretly given to her by Chef to cultivate. Not to mention the mountains of snacks and pastries. Was she going through winter? How much food did she stock up? More importantly, some of them even he had never seen before. This little bastard who ate all the food alone. She actually had the cheek to snatch food from him. That was too much. I'm not confiscating half. He waved his hand and took away half of the food inside, along with the ripe fruits on the tree. That's it, I'm leaving. Lone Moon stuffed the half-empty bag back and turned to walk across the street. Motherf ****. Master, don't be anxious. Seeing that he had walked far away, I Ching silently took out a storage bag that looked exactly the same as the one he had just seen and sent a voice transmission, your bag is here. The one that Father Nyo searched just now was just a spare. Good chef. Shining immediately took it. And, thank goodness there was a bigger one. Master. I Ching looked at Lone Moon who had already walked far away and said hesitantly, Father Nyo, did you see something? We still have to continue. That gave him a fright. Shining looked up at him and patted his shoulder. Up until now, everything is fine. But if in the future, don't worry, he is Father Nyo. What should I do now that I'm even more worried? He would definitely flip out, he definitely would. What are you two waiting for? Lone Moon turned back and called out to the two of them, we'll stay here tonight. I've already booked a room. Hurry over. Yes, Father Nyo, no problem, Father Nyo. He decided that he had to stock up more food for his master now. Who knows, he might really run out of food in the future. The night was dark like water and the full moon hung high in the sky. Perhaps because there was a monster outside the town causing trouble, the town was already silent at night. Under the moonlight, wisps of demonic chi began to appear in the forest outside the town. Lone Moon pulled Yi Qing and Shining out of the town, searching for the wisp of demonic chi that he felt during the day, and headed straight for the forest. Immortal cultivators had not started appearing in this plain yet, so the best way to spread the word was to subdue this demon and let the people in the town know what a cultivator was. He had already noticed during the day that the one causing trouble in this town was only a small demon. Its demonic chi was very weak and it was hiding in this forest. Lone Moon originally thought that it would take them a while to find it. Unexpectedly, less than 2 minutes after the three of them entered the forest, a figure came out of the forest and fell in front of them. When it fell, it hit a rock and even moved to the side before letting out a cry of pain. Lone Moon, Shining, Yi Qing, perhaps seeing that the three of them were indifferent and had no intention of going forward to help it up, the fallen figure did not get up, and then let out an even louder cry. Hey, it hurts. The three of them still did not move. Finally, the other could not take it anymore and turned to look at them. With some surprise and a little anger, it reminded them, "Aren't you going to help me up?" The three of them exchanged a look and then replied in unison, "No." This was different from what they had thought. "What exactly do you want?" Lone Moon glanced at it. Did it think they were blind? Not to mention this pretentious performance, this was obviously a demon, right? Even if it did not know how to transform, it should at least cover that huge squirrel tail behind it. That was an insult to their intelligence, okay? The squirrel demon was stunned for a moment, completely unaware that it had been exposed. Seeing that they had no intention of helping it, it could only get up by itself. It patted the dust off its clothes and picked up the bamboo basket on the ground. As if afraid of exposing its identity, it even pulled the hat on its head and wrapped itself in a loose outer robe, except for its tail. Cough. "Thank you, kind people." It coughed and continued to speak with a childish and flustered voice. "Since you helped me up, and I happened to pick some rare good mushrooms, why not? We didn't help you up." Before it could finish, Lone Moon interrupted it directly. The squirrel demon, whose rhythm was interrupted, was stunned, and a trace of panic flashed across its face. It was stunned for a moment, ignoring his exposing, and continued to act. "No, you just helped me. I will sell you the mushrooms. Look, I just picked them." With that said, it held the basket in its hands and extended it towards them. They saw that in its basket, there was really a basket of mushrooms, one red and one white. The red one was still faintly suffused with a trace of demonic aura, and the other was a spirit plant with spirit chi. Lone Moon glanced at the squirrel demon. "What kind of mushrooms do you want to sell?" The squirrel demon was delighted, and the words, "Scheme has succeeded," were clearly written on its face. It quickly took out the red one and said, This one. After thinking about it, it was a little worried, so it picked up another white one and added, "You have to buy this one too, but you have to eat the red one first. After eating it, you can eat the white one when you wake up in the morning. You can't only buy one kind." Lone Moon's eyes narrowed. "You mean if I eat this red one, I will only wake up after a night of coma?" "Yes. But you still have to eat the white one, otherwise it will be very uncomfortable." The squirrel demon nodded honestly. "I see." Lone Moon nodded. "Is this your first time coming out to cheat people?" Chapter 508. How did you know? The squirrel demon answered subconsciously, then reacted and looked at him with wide eyes, panicking. You. It stuttered for a long time but did not get an answer. Tears gathered in its eyes and it looked like it was about to cry. After a while, it asked carefully with a sobbing voice, "Do you want to buy mushrooms?" The three of them. Such bad acting skills, which school did he graduate from? It did not give up and handed 2 mushrooms, one red and one white, to Lone Moon. Just buy a pair, okay? Or I can give it to you. Seeing that they did not take it, it panicked and immediately took the whole basket. I'll give you all the white ones, I took a long time to pick them. Just buy one red one, okay? No. He directly revealed his identity. You're a demon, right? How did you know? The squirrel stiffened, a trace of panic flashed in its eyes, but it still held the basket stubbornly. Then do you want to buy mushrooms? No. Was this a retard? It did not forget to sell mushrooms at this time. The squirrel became even more anxious and turned to hand the basket to Shining. Do you want to buy one? Shining looked down. I don't want vegetables. It could only raise it to chef. I don't make vegetables. The squirrel's face turned pale, as if the sky had fallen. The blue chest in its hand loosened, and immediately the mushrooms fell to the ground. The whole demon did not feel good. It sat directly on the ground and broke down crying. Whoa! There's no time, why doesn't anyone buy my mushrooms? Little Flower will be eaten. It's all my fault, I can't save her, whoa. It howled in grief, and tears streamed down its face like beans. Its originally short body shrunk into a ball, and its large tail slapped the ground again and again. It did not even care about hiding its identity now. It let its hat fall, revealing 2 drooping triangular ears. Shining, Ching, Lone Moon, the demons of this plane were like this. Why did they have a sense of guilt like bullying a child? Don't cry. Lone Moon had a headache and couldn't help but say. I want to cry. It howled even louder, Little Flower is going to be eaten, it's all my fault. I hurt her. Wow. What Little Flower? Hey, if you cry again, I'll take care of you. Is this a child? Accept me. Anyway, Little Flower is gone, and I don't want to live anymore. Wow. Holy shit, is this little demon addicted to crying? Just as he was about to conjure a hand seal, Shining stepped forward and stuffed the fruit into his mouth. As soon as the crying stopped, the world fell silent. Mushroom, who wants to eat your Little Flower? Shining squatted down and asked. The squirrel demon was stunned and looked at her with teary eyes. Holding the fruit in his mouth with both hands, he replied pitifully, I'm a squirrel, not a mushroom. After saying that, he did not forget to hold the fruit in his hands and bite into it while sniffing and answering, It's the Tiger King. He caught Little Flower. There were other demons here. Who is Little Flower? Shining continued to ask. Little Flower is my best friend. The squirrel nodded as if emphasizing. She's like you, she will give me delicious food. When I was still a little squirrel, I lived on the tree next to her house. She would give me a big pine nut every day. He's so good looking. Look. I look just like him now. Lone Moon was stunned. He took a look at its incomplete form. That Little Flower was a human. But later, she was caught by the Tiger King. It looked sad again. The Tiger King said that if I could bring other people back to him, he would return Little Flower to me. I waited here every day, but those people were afraid of me and refused to go back with me. So, I wanted to use mushrooms. Yesterday, the Tiger King said that if I didn't bring people back, he would eat Little Flower. The more it spoke, the softer its voice became, and its head drooped lower and lower. Finally, it looked at them, unwilling to give up. You really don't intend to buy a mushroom? You've already said your purpose, who would buy it? Alright, bring us to that tiger demon. Lone Moon said directly. We'll help you save Little Flower. If he guessed correctly, that tiger demon was the one that had been causing trouble in the town recently. And this squirrel didn't have any bloody resentment on it. It seemed that it had never harmed anyone. The little flower he was talking about should also be a human. Really? Its eyes lit up and then darkened again. But the Tiger King is very powerful. Lone Moon couldn't be bothered to explain to it. He directly picked it up with one hand and flew up on his sword. Where? The squirrel was startled and quickly hugged its tail, then weakly pointed to the right. The few of them flew in the direction pointed by the squirrel. The tiger demon's lair wasn't far. They arrived in less than 2 minutes. Before they got close, they smelled a strong bloody smell from afar. It even overshadowed the demonic aura that wasn't very strong. Lone Moon looked at the cave entrance that emitted an unpleasant stench, frowned and walked in. The squirrel was already scared out of its wits. It slipped to the back, thought about it and turned to hide behind Shining. Those who gave it fruits were all good people. Once they entered the cave, the bloody smell inside was even stronger, and even a little choking. There was a faint cracking sound under their feet. I Ching turned his hand and summoned a ball of fire. It instantly lit up the cave. The cave wasn't very big, and one could see everything at a glance. The tiger demon wasn't in the cave. The whole cave was filled with bones of all kinds of beasts, but more of humans. Some had become white bones, and some still had flesh and blood, emitting waves of stench. Great, the Tiger King isn't here. The squirrel looked happy. He rushed out in an instant and began to search in the cave. Little Flower, where's Little Flower? I'm here to save you, Little Flower. It shouted for a long time, but there was no response. It began to search in a panic, and even began to pick up the bones on the ground. Lone Moon frowned, grabbed the squirrel demon and dragged it out. Let's go out first. No, I want to save Little Flower. The squirrel struggled, but was still dragged out. Let me go. There's no living person inside. Lone Moon glared at it and sighed. How long has your little flower been caught? The squirrel was stunned, and then counted with his fingers. 4, 5, 6. I don't know. But the Tiger King promised to let me exchange for her. She must. She's long dead. Looking at the situation in the cave, the tiger demon wouldn't leave anyone alive at all. It was just lying to this squirrel. Chapter 5:10. Perhaps the disdain in their eyes was too obvious. The squirrel could only add weakly, how about? I build a nest for you. He still knew how to build a nest. A very big one. The 3. Who wants to live in your nest? Forget it. Lone Moon took out a white box and handed it to I Ching. This is a cave abode that Fatty made when he was practicing last time. It's not big, just make do with it. He took out a summoning amulet and asked Fatty to come over as soon as possible. I'll meet up with you in a few days. Also, he pointed at the squirrel demon. Find a place to release this mushroom. He explained everything, focusing on Shining, before summoning his flying sword. Just as he was about to fly away, he gritted his teeth and turned back, taking out the snacks he collected from Shining last time and stuffed them back. Stay here and eat your fruits, don't lose them again. Shining's eyes lit up. Yes, Father Nyo, no problem, Father Nyo. Lone Moon then turned and flew away with the expression of a worried old father. He was tired to death for his troublesome children. For mortals who had not come into contact with immortal cultivation, it was quite easy to deceive. No, it was quite easy to advertise. Lone Moon only set up a few small spells everywhere and subdued a few troublesome demon beasts along the way. Slowly, the rumor that there was an immortal mountain in the east and fated people could ascend it to seek immortality spread throughout the entire human continent, and many people had already begun to set out to find the immortal mountain. Lone Moon also distributed a few maps at the right time, and spread rumors that the younger one was, the easier it was to cultivate and so on. There would definitely be a lot of people going there. The advertising here was very successful, but when he thought of those two troublesome prodigals, his heart was in a mess, and he felt that it would be abnormal if they did not cause some trouble. So when he finished his work and hurried back, he saw that spirit peak floating high in the air, surrounded by immortal chi, and especially that magnificent building on top of the spirit peak. He could not react for a moment. This was Chef Enchanting's doing. He subconsciously released his divine sense and scanned the place. He found that it was not transformed from an artifact. It was a real palace, and there was a large group of them. He could still vaguely sense the aura of the immortal meridian flowing on the ground, but the peak was filled with spiritual energy, and even the conversion of the spiritual energy had been completed. The family's prodigal son had suddenly become so obedient and capable. The old father was a little confused. He turned around and walked towards the back of the hall. "Father Nyo, you're back." Shining waved a hand in greeting, then quickly swept the food into her own bowl. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He sat down at the table and looked around. "Chef, what's with these palaces? Who did you capture to build it?" "I didn't capture anyone." I Ching answered seriously. "It was all built by Master Shining." Lone Moon narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "I'd believe you if you said she would demolish a house." "Building a house, hee. Wait." He immediately stood up and carefully looked around. He was too shocked just now to notice. "Why do I feel that the layout of this house is a little familiar? Why does it look a little like Hongming's?" "You guessed right. It's Purple Night Palace." I Ching answered seriously. "You pulled Hongmeng over and made him build one just like that." "That's not it." I Ching shook his head. "Master said that building a house is too troublesome. Anyway, Hongmeng has ready-made houses. We can just move it over and use it." "So?" The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. "You move the entire Purple Night Palace over. That's the fastest way. Can I ask what's left over there?" I Ching thought about it. "There's still the square in front." After all, there were still many divine beings who had not woken up from their meditation. Lone Moon was silent for a while, then took a deep breath. "Chef!" He clenched his fists by his side and patted Lone Moon's shoulder. With a serious face, he raised his thumb. "Good job." I Ching, Shining, after teaching for so many years, these two finally had some of her old father's true teachings. She was a little gratified. On the other side of the sea, Purple Night Palace was left with a bare mountain top. Hong bankrupt Meng stood on the empty square, feeling a sense of desolation in his heart. "Brother Hong, do you want a carrot to calm you down?" Rabbit could not bear to leave, so he handed a carrot over. "Hong Meng, one may not be enough." "It's all right, I'll give you a basket." With the housing problem solved, Lone Moon had a peaceful meal. He was just about to ask about the spirit chi here. After all, Purple Night Palace was originally Hongming's palace. This place should be filled with god power. Cultivators definitely could not withstand god power directly. Even immortal chi was not very suitable at the beginning of cultivation. Actually, spirit meridians were the best. But this plane had just been opened. Immortal meridians and god power were everywhere. Spirit meridians, which were relatively rare, were hard to find. He was still thinking about what kind of array to set up after planting the immortal meridians to convert the immortal chi into spirit chi. He did not expect Chef and the others to solve this problem in advance. Just as he was about to speak, Fatty walked in. Seeing him, he was instantly delighted. "Master, you're back." He walked over quickly. Behind him, a small figure carrying a basket followed. Lone Moon nodded. He glanced at the figure beside him and turned back to look at Chef. "Why is this mushroom still here? Didn't you release it?" The one beside Fatty was that squirrel demon. I'm very useful." Mushroom stepped forward and hurriedly said, "I know how to grow mushrooms." "Who wants your mushrooms?" Lone Moon frowned. "Master, the mushrooms it grows have the effect of converting immortal chi." Fatty hurriedly explained. "The spirit chi here is all converted by the mushrooms it grows. It can convert immortal chi." Lone Moon was shocked. He turned to look. There were indeed a few mushrooms growing in the courtyard. One look and he knew that they were created by sorcery. They were emitting faint spirit chi. What's going on? How could demons have such an ability, unless it's not an ordinary demon, Ching said in a low voice. Lone Moon scanned the squirrel demon from head to toe. He raised his hand and conjured a seal. The squirrel's body shook and instantly changed back to its original form. The basket in its hands fell with a thud. It happened to cover its body and its big tail. The squirrel began to struggle in a panic. Fatty hurriedly opened the basket and rescued it. It seemed to be scared out of its wits. It quickly climbed onto Fatty's shoulder and hid behind him. It stared at Lone Moon with a pair of big, teary eyes. It was the size of a palm. It was indeed a squirrel. But why could it create a mushroom that could convert spirit chi? "Fatty, bring it over." He wasn't shinning. "Was it so scary?" "Don't be afraid." Fatty comforted the squirrel demon. He then carried the squirrel down from his shoulder and brought it over. Chapter 5:11. Lone Moon adjusted a bit of immortal chi and reached out to touch the squirrel's forehead. After checking its body, his eyes widened. Spirit chi. This squirrel demon's meridians were filled with wood spirit chi, and there was no demonic chi at all. He had thought that it was a little demon that had just gained sentience, which was why its demonic chi was so weak. It turned out that it did not have any at all. And the aura of the wood spirit chi was vaguely familiar, just like a carrot. "You're a vegetation spirit." Lone Moon was shocked. Only vegetation spirits could communicate with all plants, so it was not strange that they could create mushrooms that could convert spirit chi. But he immediately denied it. "No. I'm really a squirrel." "Didn't it eat a big pine nut?" Shining suddenly said. Lone Moon paused and then reacted. "You've eaten vegetation spirits before." Vegetation spirits actually did not have a specific shape. After gaining sentience, they could change their shape according to their own will, like a carrot. It was only because Shining kept calling it a carrot that it grew more and more like a carrot. The squirrel said that the big pine nut that little flower gave it to eat should be a vegetation spirit that had not yet gained sentience. That was why it became a demon and had wood spirit chi all over its body. Its level was still low now, so it could only plant all kinds of mushrooms. When its cultivation level increased, as long as it had seeds, it would probably be able to plant all kinds of immortal herbs. Who knew how many cultivators would fight over it? "Master." Fatty could not help but speak up. "It's a little demon with nowhere to go. If it goes out, it will probably become food for other demons. Let it stay here. I will take care of it." Lone Moon glanced at Fatty. Was he thinking about his own situation, so he sympathized with this squirrel? Suddenly, he wanted to ask, do you still remember the rabbit at Daming Lake? If you want to stay, then stay. This would save him the trouble of setting up a new array and converting spirit chi. Fatty was instantly delighted. Just as he was about to say something, Lone Moon changed the topic and added, the fee for taking care of it will be deducted from your account book. Fatty tripped and almost fell. He felt that the burden, debt, on his shoulders had become even heavier. But Lone Moon sat back down. Don't think that just because you call me master, you don't have to pay your debt. He was not willing to take care of just anyone. Shining and Yi Qing. Calmly munching on the food, the immediate family expressed that they had nothing to fear. A few months later. On the open space on the east side of the continent, a dense crowd had gathered. Most of them were children around the age of 10, but there were also youths in their 20s or 30s. Some wore gorgeous clothes, while others were in tatters. They seemed to be people from all walks of life, and they were all looking around excitedly. These were the first batch of people who had heard the news and gathered here to try their luck. Recently, a rumor began to spread in various countries in the human world. At noon today, a celestial mountain would appear and accept disciples. Those who were fated could enter the mountain to cultivate. They would have the opportunity to learn extraordinary skills and might even ascend to become an immortal. Although this rumor came from a strange place, there were still many people who came from afar to witness this so-called celestial mountain. However, when they arrived, they didn't see a celestial mountain. They only saw a strange stone by the sea. On it were the words, Celestial Ascension. The words glowed with a faint golden light. It didn't seem ordinary. What immortal mountain? It's just a piece of rock. Some of the people who had come from afar couldn't help but feel disappointed when they saw that. Yeah, where are the immortals? They made us come all the way here. Why don't we come out to take a look? It seems that all the things about cultivating to become an immortal are lies. Although there were many people here, most of them didn't really come to become immortals. Instead, they were here to watch the show. In the end, they didn't see the show and only saw a piece of rock. It was inevitable that they lost their patience and wanted to leave. However, there were still more people who stayed, including some who had actually seen the immortals. You can't say that. Didn't you say it was noon? It's not time yet. Yeah, I've seen the immortals with my own eyes. The celestial mountain must be here. That's right. Maybe it's because we are mortals and haven't seen it at all. Everyone thought about it and agreed. Since they were already here, they didn't mind waiting for a few more days. The sun rose higher and higher, and the surrounding temperature also became hotter. The crowd that had gathered decreased a little. Soon, it was noon. Apart from that piece of rock, there was still no celestial mountain, let alone immortals. Everyone revealed a disappointed look. It's a lie indeed. Someone couldn't help but curse. I don't know who spread the rumor. I must find the culprit and beat him up. With that said, he lifted his leg and kicked the strange rock beside him. But there was a loud bang, and the rock instantly emitted a blinding light that shot into the sky. The person was so scared that he fell to the ground. The restless crowd suddenly quietened down. They widened their eyes and looked at the scene in front of them in shock. They saw the golden light on the rock suddenly spread to both sides. As if a layer of curtain had been lifted, the sky suddenly shook. The coastline, which was originally a straight line, suddenly changed. Suddenly, mountains appeared, hidden in the clouds. And above the mountains, a huge floating peak hung high in the sky. The peak was surrounded by clouds and mist, and the ground was bathed in sunlight. One could faintly see a magnificent palace on the top of the mountain. Immortal. Immortal mountain. It's an immortal mountain. Someone exclaimed loudly. Everyone stared at the mountain floating in the sky. There was no longer any doubt in their hearts. So there really was an immortal mountain. At this time, in the main hall. Who placed the spirit testing stone under the mountain? Lone Moon turned and asked. The advertisement had almost gone to waste. It's me. Fatty raised his hand weakly. Why did you block the entrance with the spirit testing stone? He had no choice but to open the protective mountain array. Did he know how many spirit stones it would cost to open it? Master, didn't you say that we need to select disciples with spirit roots before we can go up the mountain? Without spirit roots, one could not cultivate. Fatty lowered his head weakly. In the past, all the immortal sects did this. Lone Moon stiffened. Forget it. Put down the immortal ascension ladder. He silently made another note on Fatty's debt. Yes, master. Fatty stood up and took out a stone Dharma artifact. He was just about to throw it out. Wait. Lone Moon added. Add another spirit selection array. That way, people without spirit roots could not go up, and there would be no need for the spirit testing stone. Fatty nodded and added an array on the Dharma artifact. He activated his spirit chi and threw it out. At the seaside below, a white path suddenly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It meandered towards the mountain in front of them. It's the path to the immortal mountain. Someone exclaimed. Only then did everyone seem to wake up from their stupor and scramble to run towards the road. But the moment they stepped on the path, some people ran further and further away, while some people whizzed back to where they started. No matter how hard they tried, they could not pass. Chapter 5:12. Everyone tried many times to no avail. Only then did they remember that the rumors said that only fated people could enter the immortal mountain. They had no choice but to retreat in disappointment. But there were very few people like that. Most of these people had spirit roots. The so-called immortal ascension ladder was actually used by the small world that Fatty was in to test and select new disciples. Different from the three azure realms, the sacred arrival world that Fatty was in had very few people without spirit roots. Immortal sects had a lot of resources and were naturally very strict about taking in disciples. Not only did they have to look at spirit roots, they also had to look at potential, enlightenment and other aspects. On the immortal ascension ladder, there were many sorcery that could affect one's state of mind. The clearer one's mind and the more determined one was, the faster they could reach the top. Indeed, the people who had originally rushed up the immortal ascension ladder at the same time had already created quite a distance between them. The people who had originally been in front were all young and strong men. In less than 7 minutes, most of them had fallen behind. Moreover, most of them were panting and sweating profusely. But the women and children who had fallen behind had caught up. Especially the children who were under 10 years old, they did not look tired at all. Instead, they looked back curiously at the seemingly breathless adults. After a quarter of an hour, apart from the 5 or 6 adults who were in front, the rest were all children. How much longer do we need before we can come up? Lone Moon asked casually. Fatty glanced at him and said, we might need another hour. That wouldn't take too long. It should be over soon. Where are those 2 rascals? He turned around and realized that Chef and Shining were not in the main hall. Master, have you forgotten? Fatty reminded him. It's noon now. They went to have lunch. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Mother ***, these 2 rascals, Father Nyo, it's time to eat. Just as he was thinking, Chef's voice sounded in his ear. "Oh, there's no need for Fatty. I didn't cook for him." "All right." Seeing that they still knew to call him, he would not deduct their food expenses this time. Fatty, why did he send a voice transmission as well? He did not want to know. The distance between the people on the immortal ascension ladder increased. The people at the back looked more and more pathetic. Some of them could not even stand. Many people chose to give up and turn back. However, the moment they turned around, the immortal ascension ladder automatically teleported them back to the seaside. Hence, there were fewer and fewer people on the immortal ascension ladder. This was also Loneman's initial thought. The main purpose of the people he chose this time was not entirely to establish a sect, take in disciples, and teach them immortal cultivation. Instead, it was to pass down cultivation techniques to the human world. Therefore, not only did these people have to learn it, but they also had to pass it on to more people in the future. This allowed the human race to have the ability to protect themselves in the primordial world, where the heavenly Tao had yet to be completely established. In modern terms, it was to let some people get rich first, and then lead everyone to get rich together. Therefore, there was no need to recruit too many disciples, just a few would do. However, they were all going to become grandmasters in the future, so the selection process was naturally very strict. 15 minutes later, there were only a few figures left on the immortal ascension stairs. Most of the children were around 10 years old, and upon closer inspection, there were 20 to 30 of them. Next were young women, and there were only about 10 of them left. The ones with the least were the strong men who had been the fastest at the start. What was amazing was that there were 2 older men among them. However, they were not at the bottom of the group. Instead, they were walking behind the 2 children. As for the 2 children, they were walking at the back of the group. They were also the most exhausted. They were a boy and a girl. Among all the children, only the little boy was panting and sweating profusely. It was not because of the array formation, but because he was carrying a little girl on his back. The 2 of them were about the same age. Naturally, it was difficult for him to carry her, but he still persisted. The only person left in the main hall, Fatty, looked at the 2 of them curiously. The little girl's face was pale and sickly. One look and he could tell that there was something wrong with her body. From time to time, she would take out a small handkerchief to wipe the boy's sweat. The 2 of them seemed to be related by blood. They were probably siblings. Perhaps because the 2 of them were so special, Fatty could not help but look at them. They were still a distance away from the peak. The immortal ascension stairs would only be open for 2 hours. If they were lucky, they should be able to reach the top. At this moment, the person walking at the front was almost at the top. Fatty thought of the squirrel demon who was still planting mushrooms at the entrance. With a turn of his body, he teleported to the entrance of the mountain. Indeed, a child who was not even 10 years old, with a pink face, had already appeared at the entrance of the mountain. The squirrel demon, who was diligently planting mushrooms at the side, jumped in fright. The spirit chi in his body surged out uncontrollably. With a few spluttering sounds, the ground around him was instantly filled with mushrooms. Monster! The child was shocked. Perhaps because he was too young, he did not know fear. Instead, he pointed at the squirrel demon and shouted. He even wanted to reach out to grab the squirrel demon's huge tail. Mushroom, Fatty called out and walked over. Great! Great immortal! The squirrel demon threw the mushroom that had fallen to the ground and hid behind Fatty. He looked at the child at the entrance of the mountain with an aggrieved expression. The child was stunned. Perhaps he recognized Fatty's identity. He immediately bowed respectfully. Chi Su Nation's Lu Jing greets immortal elder. His eyes were still looking curiously at the squirrel demon beside him. Fatty nodded and pointed to the empty space beside him. You are the first person to reach the top. Wait at the side first. When the people behind you come up, I will bring you to see Master. Yes, Immortal Elder. Lu Zheng obediently stood to the side. He was dressed well. His family must be wealthy. That was why he was so polite at such a young age. But he was still a child. He could not help but look around curiously. Fatty did not wait long at the mountain gate. The people behind him had already arrived. The first few were all children. When the fifth person arrived, a woman appeared. Then, a young man and an elder came up. It was almost time. The stairway was starting to disappear from the bottom. Those who were still on it were immediately transported back. Just as the stairway was about to disappear completely, the boy carrying the little girl finally arrived. When he saw the mountain gate, his expression lit up. He seemed to use all his strength as he quickened his pace, wanting to climb the last few steps. Suddenly, a tall man rushed out from behind him. At this point, the stairway was about to disappear. He also quickened his pace. As if annoyed that the child was blocking his way, he pushed the person in front of him aside. Out of the way. Then, at the last moment, he reached the top of the mountain. When he looked up, he saw Fatty surrounded by immortal chi. Before he had time to rejoice, his figure flashed and he was transported back to the seaside. Chapter 5:13. Fatty furrowed his brows. He could have come up with the two kids, but he had taken the unnecessary step of pushing someone else. If mortals fell from here, they would be smashed to pieces. But the immortal ascension ladder could not harm anyone, or they would be teleported out. People with such evil intentions could not be accepted into the sect. He immediately cast a spell to summon the children who had fallen off the immortal staircase back to the immortal staircase. He retreated a certain distance and sent a sliver of immortal chi to the immortal ascension ladder, delaying the disappearance of the ladder. After all, it was pardonable. He would give them another chance and see what choice they would make. Unexpectedly, the child only hesitated for a moment before continuing to walk towards the mountain gate. His eyes were resolute, and he did not let go of the little girl on his back. He really managed to reach the top of the ladder before it disappeared again. Fatty kept the immortal ascension ladder and closed the protective array outside. The people on the beach watched as the entire immortal mountain started to disappear. Fatty turned to look at the only 9 people who had climbed up. Since you can reach the immortal door, you are fated to be immortals. Follow me now. I will bring you to meet the immortal elders who will be teaching you immortal arts in the future. Teaching us immortal arts. Then they will be our masters in the future. Someone said excitedly. Fatty paused and thought about the 3 people in the back hall. Lone Moon had not acknowledged him as his disciple all these years, I Ching had never accepted disciples, and Lady Xin. Forget it. He replied, you should call yourselves exalted masters. They will teach you cultivation, but they will not accept you as disciples. Everyone was a little disappointed, but they still followed him to the back hall, their eyes filled with anticipation. Considering the image of the sect, Fatty calculated the time and even specially brought everyone around in a big circle before arriving at the rear hall. As expected, they had already finished eating. From afar, they could see 3 people sitting in the courtyard. There were 2 men and 1 woman. The man on the left was drinking tea, while the woman in the middle was leaning on a chair, chewing on a fruit. The other man was pouring tea for her. Apart from the woman in the middle, the other 2 were surrounded by immortal chi. Master. Fatty looked at Lone Moon and said, the selected disciples have arrived. There are 9 in total. 9. Lone Moon paused. What a coincidence. The first batch of Invincible sect disciples also consisted of 9 people. He scanned the group. Apart from 3 adults, the rest were all little radishes. Greetings, Immortal Elder. The 3 adults cupped their fists and bowed. The other children followed suit and bowed as well. Yes. Lone Moon nodded. He put down the cup of tea in his hand and stood up. Since you have passed the test of the Immortal Ascension Ladder, you have officially entered the Immortal Sect. Everyone's eyes lit up. They were even more excited than before. Nowadays, demons are running amok in the human world, and there are even more dangers in the outside world that you can't even imagine. I'm teaching you the art of cultivation because I want to wait until you've mastered it before you can establish your own sects and raise even more cultivators to resolve the dangers in the world. Lone Moon spoke his mind directly. That's why I hope that all of you will work hard in your cultivation in the future. Only then will you have the ability to teach others. Yes, Immortal Elder. They replied in unison. Yes. Lone Moon nodded and introduced himself. My Taoist name is Lone Moon. That's I Ching. The one beside him is not important. He would not remember them anyway. Shening. Son of AB*TCH. From tomorrow onwards, we will officially teach you the art of cultivation. Today, all of you can first. Lone Moon was just about to make arrangements for their accommodations. Immortal Elder. A child on the right suddenly cried out. With a plop, he knelt down in front of Lone Moon. Immortal Elder, please save my younger sister. As long as you can save her, I will do anything you want me to do. With that said, he began to kowtow to Lone Moon. Beside him was a little girl who seemed to be in a daze. She seemed to be unable to stand on her own and was being supported by an adult girl beside her. Lone Moon looked questioningly at Fatty. Fatty hesitated for a moment. It was obvious that he did not know what was going on, but he added, "This child's younger sister seems to be ill." He carried her on his back all the way up the Immortal Ascension Ladder. Oh. Lone Moon looked at the child on the ground. Tell me, what exactly happened? Replying Immortal Elder, the little boy replied immediately. A few years ago, my younger sister was accidentally bitten by a monster. Since then, she has been unable to walk. The villagers all said that she was an inauspicious person and would bring disaster. They chased us out. Immortal Elder, you are an immortal. You must have a way to cure my younger sister, right? I beg you, please save her. You climbed the Immortal Ascension Ladder just to cure her. Lone Moon glanced at the little girl and fixed his gaze on her legs. He could tell at one glance that her legs had been invaded by demonic aura. That was why they had become like this. However, it was not very serious. Yes. The little boy nodded vigorously. Then what if I let you choose between cultivation and curing your younger sister? Lone Moon asked. The little boy was stunned. He did not expect Lone Moon to say this. He turned back to look at the little girl behind him and gritted his teeth. I choose my younger sister. Immortal Elder, please grant me my wish. Lone Moon nodded. This was a good child. He stood up and walked to the little girl's side. He lifted his hand and dispelled the demonic aura on her legs. The little girl hesitated. Suddenly, she felt that her legs had regained strength. She subconsciously stood up straight. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Brother, I can walk now. The little boy was ecstatic. He immediately pulled his younger sister to kneel down with him. Thank you, Immortal Elder. Thank you, Immortal Elder, there's no need. Lone Moon reached out to support him. You're so young. For you to go so far for your loved ones, you can be considered. Ah! He had wanted to praise him, but he suddenly felt something strange in his hand. Alarmed, he pulled the little boy up and examined him carefully. He even released a wisp of sword chi. Indeed, in a short while, he felt a tiny trace of sword chi rebound from his body. Holy shit, an innate sword embodiment. He actually had the same constitution as Chef. This was an innate sword cultivator's constitution. The kind that would not go astray. He immediately pulled the little boy back and said seriously, "I've decided to take you in as my disciple. Come, call me master." With that said, he shot a look at the master and disciple behind him. "Shining, Ichin, Fatty, didn't you say you wouldn't take in disciples?" Fatty felt bitter. Lone Moon did not expect that he would meet an innate sword embodiment just by doing some advertisement. Thinking of the teaching history that he had been through, his stomach filled with bitterness. Forget about the body cultivators in the sect. The only one who taught diligently, Fatty, was an innate sword cultivator. This innate sword embodiment was practically here to save his worldview. Lone Moon finally saw some light at the end of the road for sword cultivators. Chapter 5:14. Lone Moon immediately accepted a disciple and insisted that he would completely isolate Xin Ying's negative influence. He taught her step by step. Even Chef was isolated. He didn't believe he couldn't teach a pure sword cultivator. Lone Moon even specially gave him a Daoist name, Jian Xing. It meant the prosperity of the sword cultivator business. Anyway, these people were going to go out in the future and establish their own sections. By then, he would establish a sword cultivator sect. Just thinking about it made him happy. So he taught even more energetically, from basic swordsmanship to guiding chi into the body. He was unprecedentedly serious. And Jian Xing was indeed smart. Among everyone, he was the first to succeed in guiding chi into the body. As for the others, the introductory teaching was basically handed over to Fatty. Lone Moon only occasionally gave them a few pointers. In addition, apart from being handicapped in swordsmanship, Fatty was an all-rounder in all other aspects. There was basically no problem teaching him. Among them, none of them had natural sword embodiment. Most of them were average, including Jian Xing's sister, Shi Lin, who had 4 spirit roots. But fortunately, their comprehension was acceptable. Although they couldn't cultivate to become mighty figures, they could still establish their own sects and be teachers of Tao. In addition, this plane had just been born. It was a good time for cultivation. As long as they didn't slack off, it wasn't very difficult to become immortal. Fatty was obviously much more reliable than Lone Moon, who had fallen into the sword cultivator syndrome. After observing everyone's preferences for a few months, he began to teach them in a targeted manner. Only when there was a problem with swordsmanship would he ask Yi Qing to come out and help out. So everyone in the sect threw themselves into the business of cultivation, except Shining. As a 10,000-year-old mascot, Xin Ying's contribution to the sect had always been only one mission: watering. In the past, with Radish around, she had to go to the back mountain to water it every day. Now that Radish was replaced by mushrooms, she had to water the mushrooms planted by the squirrel demon every day. Perhaps because of a fruit from before, the squirrel had a good impression of Shining. In addition, the immortal meridian on this mountain happened to be planted in the back mountain. The squirrel had to plant mushrooms near the immortal meridian every day to completely convert the immortal chi into spirit chi. The general process was for the squirrel to plant in front, and she to water in the back. After planting, she nibbled on her fruit, and he ate his pine nuts. It was a tacit understanding. Greetings, immortals. While the two of them were eating, a young girl's voice came from behind them. They turned around and saw a girl in white bowing to them. She was a little short and looked to be around 10 years old. Her face was very delicate, and it could be seen that she would grow up to be graceful. Mushroom was familiar with Fatty and recognized that this girl was the disciple that Lone Moon had taken in, Jian Xing's younger sister. Her name seemed to be Jilin. He immediately jumped down from the rock and shook his hand in a panic. I'm not some exalted immortal. You can just call me Mushroom. It had just gained sentience not long ago and had never had a name. Shining called it Mushroom, so it decided to call it Mushroom. Sister Mushroom. Jilin readily accepted her advice and called out sweetly. She turned to look at the person on the rock and asked, "How should I address this sister?" Shining paused for a moment before replying, "Shining." Sister Shin. Jilin called out as well. She looked at her a few times curiously before saying, "Exalted Guru Hui asked me to come to the back of the mountain to pick some spirit herbs for refining elixirs. I wonder if the two of you can, go ahead, go ahead." Mushroom waved her hand generously. "Since Huizhe ordered you to, just go ahead and pick." "Thank you, sisters." Her smile became even sweeter. She nodded at the two of them and turned to walk towards the spirit herbs on the ground. She began to pick the spirit herbs she needed seriously. Mushroom could not help but look at her curiously. She was a demon and most humans were afraid of demons. So even though Fatty had explained that she was just a good demon who had just started cultivating, these disciples would still subconsciously stay away from her. So she could only follow Shining to plant mushrooms. Jilin was the first among the 9 to take the initiative to talk to her. She could not help but feel a little happy and looked at her a few more times. But she realized that the more she picked, the closer she was to the edge of the immortal meridian. Mushroom panicked and immediately reminded her, "Wait. You can't pick those mushrooms." Jilin paused and then retracted her hand. She turned back and smiled. "Sorry, Sister Mushroom. I thought they were spirit herbs too." "It's all right." Mushroom did not mind. Shining, who was at the side, jumped down from the rock and dusted her butt. "I'm done watering them. Mushroom, I'm going back to eat." "Oh, okay." Mushroom nodded and smiled at Jilin again before following her. "I'm going to look for Huizhe too. Goodbye, sisters." Jilin also waved at Mushroom politely, but her gaze landed on Shining at the side again. They did not know before they started cultivating. They thought that she was a great immortal guru like the other 3. But after they guided the chi into her body, they realized that this Shining did not have any immortal chi. However, the High Masters had a very special attitude towards her. Especially Guru I Ching, who would occasionally come to give them pointers. He was almost inseparable from her. So they became even more curious. But she did not seem to like to talk much. Jilin took a closer look. Something flashed in her eyes. Then she turned back and continued to pick the spirit herbs. Perhaps because he was addicted to teaching disciples, Lone Moon did not come to the rear hall to fight for food with Shining recently. Without the control of the elders, Shining completely let herself go. She finally lived a few years of eating and sleeping, eating and drinking without anyone caring about her. And the 9 disciples who accompanied her as immortal cultivators also improved very quickly in their cultivation. In just a few years, they were almost at foundation establishment. Jian Xing even reached the late stage of foundation establishment. He was just one step away from core formation. Lone Moon estimated the time. It was time for them to go out and gain some practical experience. "But, me?" Shining paused. "Yes, you and Fatty bring them there together," Lone Moon said seriously. "Why? Why her? There are 2 more races fighting on the divine races side. And it's near Purple Night Palace." Lone Moon frowned. "There are a bunch of people who have not woken up yet. Hong Meng called us back urgently to catch them and bring them back for lessons. Chef was in charge of catching, he was in charge of teaching. Oh. The place I chose for training happens to be near the segregated area by the sea. Although with Fatty's cultivation, there is no danger. But after all, the rules of this plane have not been formed yet. And these disciples are going out for the first time. You go just in case. Chapter 5:15. Lone Moon continued, "Don't worry, we'll be back in no time. Anyway, you just have to follow along. Unless it's absolutely necessary, there's Fatty to take care of everything else." Sigh, so troublesome. Troublesome my ass. You're a manager after all, can't you have some self-awareness of your position? Lone Moon stuffed a bag into her hands. Here. This is the food chef prepared for you for these few days. Let's go quickly. With that said, without waiting for Chef who was washing the vegetables to return, he pushed Shining onto the departing pirate ship. Oh no, the spirit ship. Shining, Miss Shin. Fatty immediately waved at her. Perhaps because she was too much of a homebody, the 9 disciples in the sect only saw her once on the day they entered the sect, so they all turned to look at her curiously. The group of children back then had all grown up into young men and women. Shining lifted the bag in her hands, it seemed to be quite heavy, before walking towards Fatty. The place Lone Moon chose, to be precise, was outside the isolation zone of the human race, on a huge island. There were spirit herbs everywhere, and no one had set foot on it for a long time. In addition, there were all kinds of demon beasts that had not developed intelligence, and all kinds of sounds could be heard from afar. It was indeed a good place for training. Fatty steered the spirit ship to land on a flat piece of land. This was the edge of the island, and it was relatively safe. But there were also spirit herbs everywhere. The eyes of the 2 disciples who specialized in alchemy lit up. Fatty released his divine perception and scanned for a while before letting the disciples go out. Since it was their training, Fatty did not care much. He just let them decide which direction to go. The one with the highest cultivation among the 9 was Jian Xing, and he was also Lone Moon's in-house disciple, so the others seemed to see him as the leader. After picking a few spirit herbs, the few of them finally decided to head towards the center of the island. Fatty and Shining followed far behind. The island was filled with all kinds of spirit herbs and all kinds of cultivation materials. There was much more variety than in the sect. The disciples who rarely came out naturally would not let go of this opportunity. So most of the time was spent on collecting these materials. Among them, they also encountered sudden attacks from demon beasts, but they were not very powerful, and the few of them could deal with them together. Although some people were injured, they were more scared than hurt, and continued to push forward. Perhaps it was the novelty of coming out for experience for the first time, these disciples were full of energy. In just a few days, they had already traveled a long distance. However, he had to stop once a day in the morning, afternoon, and evening. And it was Fatty who forced them to stop, for no other reason than, it was time for Shining to eat. Fatty knew how punctual Shin Ying's mealtime was. Basically, it would not change. These disciples had already abstained from eating, so they didn't need to eat. In addition, there were only a few of them, so they naturally couldn't split up. Thus, they could only stop and wait. At the start, the disciples were busy gathering all kinds of spirit herbs and materials, so they didn't think much of it. But slowly, what needed to be harvested and what needed to be collected was more or less done. Everyone still had to stop and wait for her to finish eating every day, so they could not help but have some opinions about this. Their faces were faintly filled with dissatisfaction, especially a few of the younger ones, who looked at Shining with hidden anger in their eyes. Shining, on the other hand, did not react at all. It was as if she could not feel the resentment of the crowd. She continued to eat her food like a whirlwind. She even raised her head to look at Fatty, then kindly handed him a bowl of plain rice. Here. The corner of Fatty's mouth twitched. Instantly, he thought of those days where he ate plain rice. It's all right, Miss Shin. I've already succeeded in abstaining from eating. Don't tempt me. Oh. Shining took back the rice she had just refilled and took a bite. I was just asking. So you didn't even want to give it to me? Fatty frowned. He turned back to look at the 9 disciples waiting at the side. He had taught these people for so many years, so he could naturally guess what they were thinking. Thus, he explained, Master has instructed that during this experiential training, we must not disturb Miss Shin while she eats and sleeps. Especially when she sleeps. Although he did not understand why Master emphasized on sleeping, he still patiently advised, cultivation is not something that can be achieved in a day. The main purpose of this tribulation is to train your state of mind. You must remember this. The few of them were stunned for a moment. Their expressions changed. Especially the older ones, they immediately reacted and no longer looked as impatient as before. But there were still a few who were indignant. When they entered the sect, they were not old to begin with. They had not experienced much. After these few years of cultivation, they were only in their teens. They became cultivators above mortals in one leap. Their state of mind had become too arrogant. Although they did not dare to say anything due to Loneman's instructions, they still blamed Shining for delaying their time. They continued walking like this for a few days. After stopping to eat once again, a female disciple finally could not take it anymore. She walked over with a bottle of elixirs and said with some anger, Here, this is an abstinence pill. Shining paused and turned to look at her. There was still half a mouthful of rice in her mouth, chewing it with bulging cheeks. Zu. Fatty stood up angrily. He had clearly told her that this was Master's order. Exalted Master Huizhe. Ziyu looked at Fatty with some grievance. With this, she doesn't have to stop to eat. One abstinence pill could make one not hungry for a month. Fatty was about to reprimand her when Shining glanced at the bottle in her hand and replied, I don't eat mylar. What mylar? The other party faltered for a moment and immediately realized that she did not want to eat it. I'm doing this for your own good. If you eat this, you won't have to go through the trouble of stopping to eat. Ziyu was getting angrier. Why aren't you eating it? Because it doesn't taste good. Shining replied matter-of-factly. You. Ziyu was so angry that her face turned red. She thought that she was deliberately finding fault. You're too much, you're delaying everyone's time, enough. Before she could finish, Fatty directly cut her off. His usually kind face had a rare darkened, and he unknowingly released some pressure, looking at Ziyu with some anger. I've said it before, Miss Shin's 3 meals a day were personally instructed and agreed by Master. It's not your place to object. Ziyu froze instantly, as if frightened by Fatty's sudden change in expression. She took a few steps back. Fatty then turned to look at the others. Also, Miss Shin's cultivation level is high and her status is even more extraordinary. Since all of you are cultivating in the sect, you shouldn't have the slightest bit of disrespect towards her, otherwise the consequences are not something you can bear. How could he not tell that the reason why Ziyu dared to take out the abstinence pill to offend her face was actually because she saw that Shining did not have a shred of immortal qi on her and did not abstain from eating. She thought that her cultivation level was not high or that she was just a mortal. What a joke. A mortal who could make an ancient ferocious beast cry with one slap, who could afford to offend her. So he simply pointed it out, in case they did anything stupid in the future. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.